If you want to just give me a thumbs up if you're in the middle of, okay, we're good to go. All right, then welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for, I think this would be our first ever virtual annual meeting for Darby Creek Valley Association. So I get to see a lot of faces here. Thank you. A number of you, I know a number of you are board members. A number are members or volunteers, and we welcome you. It's great to at least see you in some form or fashion, even if we are not in person. But we have a great program today. We're going to try to be mindful of how long people will be sitting in front of their computers, and we'll take a break at some point in between the couple of presentations this morning. And please feel free to ask questions. You do have the chat option. You can unmute yourself to ask those questions while speakers are giving their presentations. If they so choose during their presentation or at the end, they will let you know. Does anybody have any questions for me right now before we start our day? And as you can see, my name, I forgot to say it right, Jaclyn Rhoads. I am president of Darby Creek Valley Association. I wanted to introduce a couple of people. I don't know if many of you know, but this past year we contracted with Aurora Diesel. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Okay, just wave. People can see you.
Good morning, everybody.
And she's been fantastic helping out in managing our database, website, helping with programs, especially education programs, which we'll hear a little bit more about, and you can see in our wonderful annual report. I want to say thank you to our board members, Jerry Craig, Kate Doms, and then of course, Sue Miller and Aurora in helping to put that together. I think it looks wonderful. Sue, oh, there you go. If you want to say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy that everyone was able to make it on a Saturday morning. Yeah.
Luckily, it's a little frigid out, so it's tempting to go outside, even though it looks very sunny. Also, we have Jolie Jacobs, who's an intern for us this year. Jolie interned with us for a short summer appointment. I guess it was like a year ago. I don't know. Time just seems to blend. Do you want to say hi, Jolie?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everyone.
And with that, let's officially start. Aurora, are you able to share a flag? Going back to our tradition of doing our pledge. All right. You're going to take yourself off mute. You don't necessarily have to stand if you can't get the, vertical part of it, if you so choose. But I will begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I will say that kind of our motto and invocation for today is that we may leave this earth a better place than which we found it. And I think all the work that we are all doing definitely tries to achieve that and advance it. So amen to that. All right. Let me start. I mean, it'll be a little hard to see just because we have two screens, but I also want to recognize board members. So if you want to, board members, give a little thumbs up in your box so people can see who are all of our board members that are joining us today. Give you a minute to do that. Well, yes, we have, I saw Carl, he gave the actual thumbs up versus the virtual thumbs up. So we do, it's actually under reactions. See, there's my thumbs up. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Others, I see a couple other board members, but they haven't given their thumbs up yet. But they are there. So we have a number of board members here with us that obviously do wonderful work. Our organization, as many of you know, have been a very active working board up until goodness 2.5 years when we started contracting with people that help us in advancing our mission and really expanding the work that we've been doing. So it's been fantastic. So I wanted to highlight a couple of those things that have been just in light of COVID, we've been able to achieve over the past year. And I'm sure we would all agree that it has been a challenging year. Who would have thought that it would be almost a full year since we had all gone into quarantine. And then, of course, with variations of that over the past several months. But with that, there are a lot of things that we can do outdoors, which of course is fantastic. You know, a lot of people took advantage of our open spaces, our parks, our trails, which, you know, without it, what would we have done? So thankful for that, and for the county and the state, and of course, for the National Wildlife Refuge, John Hines. I know several people visited there during this trying time. And I think for all of us, it just sends the message that we need to appreciate those open spaces even more than what we had before. And I think many of us here today appreciate it, but I think the message has gone out to those that normally would not have used those spaces, that now they have had their eyes open to what it means to protect those lands. So in addition to that, we continued to work on having cleanups throughout the watershed. We had to cancel our kind of like one day or couple day activities in April around Earth Day last year, but we're able to pick back up in the fall with several smaller cleanups throughout the watershed, which was wonderful. Many people here had participated in that. We had about 500 adults participate, as well as families, you know, not including the little ones that tagged along to help do cleanups. So that was wonderful. Picking up about 28 tons of trash. I mean, it's great that we're cleaning it up. We need to get to the next level though, where we try to reduce that amount and get people to either stop littering, illegal dumping, and or controlling our stormwater so we don't have as much trash entering into our waterways. And I think we'll hear more about that in terms of a new endeavor, hopefully that we'll be able to share with you later in the year, but we will be hearing from Melissa Muroff about some of her activities, but we're not quite there yet. But just to give you a little plug and a little preview, can't wait to hear from Melissa. And as a result of COVID, obviously we all had to adapt. And so a number of our in-person programs turned into webinars. Aurora really helped with that, especially as it relates to youth programming. We had a total of 26 webinars that Sue and Aurora helped to put together with almost 700 people participating. And that, of course, is huge. I think not only for DCVA, but a number of organizations out there had adjusted and moved to online programming. And to be honest with you, I think that is going to be a component that many people will continue to implement. I think a lot of people appreciated the opportunity to be at home and not worry about traveling in order to hear all the great things, learn about activities and volunteer opportunities, as well as just become educated on various issues throughout the watershed. We also, with the help of Steve Lockhart, who's here today, as well as Jamie Anderson, and then of course, Sue and others, put together a new rain garden program in Upper Darby, modeled after Have a Rain Garden. And I think it's great to create those programs, and hopefully that is something that could be replicated all throughout the watershed, where citizens get involved and decide we're going to help and take responsibility for trying to improve the stormwater management, beautification, and all the wonderful things that are associated with putting in more rain gardens throughout our community. So I just wanted to highlight some of those things. Also, we received a great award at the end of the year by receiving a $25,000 grant from, is it the Delco Strong Foundation? So you correct me if I'm wrong there in the name. That is something that Sue Miller put in for us, and I think just goes to show how much we were able to achieve in this past year and more to come. So with that being said, we're going to officially start our program. And for those of you that just joined on, again, please keep yourself on mute. I did post in chat that you can post any questions there, especially if you're running into any technical difficulties. Aurora, you stop sharing screen, but Melissa, you should be able to share your screen as needed. You're good to go there.
I can't, oh, see, look.
It's back up, but I figured it would be easier if you want to just run through your slides.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, I have a formal introduction for you.
Oh gosh. I'm used to formal, but
I just know we're going to hear a little bit more about, who you are. I mean, I know I personally was very excited hearing about your position and joining Delaware County's District Attorney Office, Assistant District Attorney, starting in January of 2020. Melissa is the Chief of the Environmental Crimes Unit and the member of the Office's Appellate Unit. And the Environmental Crimes Unit works with local and state regulatory agencies and law enforcement, as well as NGOs and community groups, to raise awareness of and prosecute environmental violations in Delaware County. Prior to joining Delaware County's office, Melissa owned a high-performance sustainable landscape architecture and engineering firm. She served as the board chair for the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia and worked with governments, nonprofits, and industry groups to advance sustainable water resource policies and environmental justice. So Melissa has her master's in medical genetics, which is very interesting. She worked for over 10 years in the field of human genetics and health policy. And she earned her Juris Doctorate from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago Kent College of Law, and was admitted to the Pennsylvania Bar in 2006.
yeah, I'm that old.
Melissa.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. And I know I have 30 minutes, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to give a very genuine nod and acknowledgement and mention of gratitude to DCVA, because as you'll see as I go through this, dealing with environmental crimes and prosecuting environmental cases takes a village, and DCVA has been amazing. You have taught me a lot, and I will continue to do my best to serve the community in Delaware County, and you guys have really been at the forefront in helping to identify what those major issues are. So thank you. All right, I'm going to kick this off. And as I understand it, I am going to talk at you, I guess, for 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions for the following 15 minutes. But obviously, feel free to put comments in the chat. So this first slide is a bit of a roadmap. I want to introduce why we have an environmental crimes unit in the first place, talk a little bit about what our jurisdiction is, what it is we actually can prosecute in the district attorney's office, the enforcement process. And then I want to zoom in a little bit to Delaware County. What is our perspective? What are we seeing? And particularly take a bit of time to talk about environmental justice and environmental racism. And then lastly, I touch on our approach to environmental crimes, which is really one of community prosecuting in large measure. So the DA Stolzheimer was elected in November of 2019, and his campaign platform included, among other things, a focus on environmental protection. when he was elected, the Environmental Crimes Unit, he started in January 2020, and that's when the Environmental Crimes Unit was launched. And I want to share that the district attorney is a state's attorney. So just like, for example, the attorney general is a state's attorney. So one of the drivers for an environmental crimes unit really stemmed in part from conversations between Attorney General Josh Shapiro and then candidate Jack Stolzheimer about the need for a focus on environmental crimes at the county level. Because interestingly, the Attorney General's office, which many of you may know this, but the Attorney General's office does not have original jurisdiction over environmental crimes. So what that means is the Attorney General cannot open an investigation or impanel a grand jury to address allegations of an environmental crime unless that case is first referred to it by either a district attorney, a regulatory agency like the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, or even a county solicitor for that matter. The case has to be referred to the AG's office. And as I understand it, referrals to the AG's office for environmental crimes was kind of diminishing. And I don't think anybody was really seriously believing that organizations and folks were cleaning up their act and not committing environmental crimes anymore. So, and there was an interest in kind of trying to find a more proactive way to foster referrals to the AG's office, or at least continue to prosecute environmental crimes. So I'll talk about this a bit later, but again, the jurisdiction that both the Attorney General has and the District Attorney has is at the state law level. So as I mentioned, nobody seriously believed that the actual committing of environmental crimes was on the decrease. And just to kind of underscore that point, I wanted to give you sort of a perspective on the prevalence of environmental crimes. And I get that these statistics are old. I really couldn't find more current ones, but in any case, just looking at organizations, so that's obviously corporations, but it can be unions, trusts, nonprofits for that matter, partnerships. Among organizations, environmental crimes in 2015 constituted the most common type of federal crime. So these are not fringe occurrences. And as this slide identifies, the most common among those federal environmental crimes was water related, but you can see the rest of the breakout. None of this slide comes as a surprise to any of you, I'm sure, but I wanted to point out the challenges associated with prosecuting and even identifying an environmental crime versus more typical street crimes. Environmental crimes have much more in common with white collar crimes. Another unique challenge, well, somewhat unique challenge, is that enforcement of environmental crimes relies a lot on corporate self-reporting. And by that, I mean corporations that have permits to pollute from either DPA or the DEP or what have you, have obligations to report that they are remaining in compliance. So, that is fraught with it's not always fraught, but it can be fraught. Jurisdiction spans multiple state and local entities, and we'll talk about that later, but the state regulatory agencies have jurisdiction over environmental crimes, as does the Attorney General's office. We do, and certainly in some cases, even solicitors, county solicitors, for example. Violations kind of are mainly addressed administratively, but also can be addressed even in parallel in a criminal context. Evidence is often hard to find. We'll talk about that later. And identifying and proving environmental crimes is often extraordinarily scientific and technical. The regulations that govern what you can do and can't do are highly technical. And the victim profiles are really varied. And I know that you all know this even more so than I do, but victims can be entire communities. They can be the unborn. And most of the environmental statutes, or a lot of the environmental statutes, identify the victim as the planet. So the victim profile is complicated. And this is not unique to, obviously, environmental crimes, but a district attorney's office has prosecutorial discretion. So I just wanted to kind of provide a very general context of the characteristics that get weighed in the DA's office before it determines whether or not it's going to proceed on an environmental case. In general, and none of these are bright lines, but in general, the DA's office is going to focus more on organizational offenders as opposed to individuals, as opposed to the one guy who pours, motor oil down the sewer, for example. Culpability that's probably an obvious point that we would be weighing. The impact of the damage, the degree or the magnitude of the danger to the public are significant factors. Obviously, the interest of the victims, whether the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator is kind of a repeat offender and has a pattern of polluting as part of their business practice is obviously very relevant. And then the likelihood of conviction. So again, none of these are bright line rules, but it does give you a perspective on how decisions are made in the DA's office. So I mentioned before that the district attorney is a state attorney. Our jurisdiction is limited to violations of state law, state environmental law, in the case of the Environmental Crimes Unit. But by limited, I don't want to suggest that the scope is small. I just wanted to give you a taste of the breadth of the state environmental statutes. And I'm not going through all of these, but I just kind of wanted to give you a sense of the number of them. And in addition to the state environmental statutes, the Constitution itself has a beautiful provision that can also serve as a basis for prosecution, but it's one that is approached cautiously because using this provision as a basis of a suit has to be done such that you're not risking a precedent that narrows the scope of this amendment. But it is a pretty powerful statement that should embody the vision of the Commonwealth relative to the environment. But in addition to the law of the land that's very focused on environmental issues, as I mentioned, other laws come into play as well, because as I mentioned, environmental crimes are not only do they have a lot in common with white collar crimes, but they're often the environmental crime cases are often include white collar crimes as well. And Title 18 in the Pennsylvania statutes identifies those. Those would be what I'm referring to are crimes like fraud or forgery or falsification of records or deceptive business practices. So it's not uncommon for an environmental crime to also be kind of intertwined with Title 18 crimes. The Title 30 also has laws associated to fish and that's the name of the title, actually. And to be honest with you, we haven't referenced that much, but the unfair, and then lastly, there is the Unfair Trade Practices and Consumer Protection Law statute. And that is a pretty powerful tool for district attorneys, as well as county solicitors for that matter, in pursuing public interest lawsuits. And that's another capacity that the district attorney has, which is we can talk about later, or I can address in the questions. So enforcement, how do cases get to a district attorney's office, or for that matter, an attorney general's office? They are referred to our office from any number of sources. I would say in my experience so far, as young as the environmental crimes unit is, most of the complaints that we've received have come from the community, also non-governmental organizations and municipal officials. Absolutely, like township managers, for example, will reach out to us. And then also the Department of Emergency Services. They've been fantastic. So far, that's been the most common source of referrals into the DA's office. Historically, though, because again, our unit's only a year old, and I should also add that Delaware County is the only district attorney's office, and district attorneys operate at the county level. It's the only district attorney's office in Pennsylvania that has an environmental crimes unit, which isn't to say that other DA's offices don't prosecute environmental crimes, but they don't have a designated focus for environmental crimes. So we are unique that way. In fact, it's really not that common across the United States to have a DA's office with an environmental crimes section of some sort. So in any case, historically, before we existed, the way that environmental offenses got processed or resolved was largely, it's largely at the administrative level. So, and that's still true today. Most environmental offenses are processed in a civil capacity by the regulatory agencies in an administrative process where there are fines, notices of violations, a consent order, and the violation is resolved in that way. Only when the administrative process is not resolving the problem do those cases typically get referred to, well, historically, they've been referred to the Attorney General's office for criminal prosecution. So kind of this slide sort of reiterates what I just identified, that the regulatory agencies tend to process environmental violations from an administrative perspective. And if that doesn't work, those cases can be referred for criminal prosecution. So, as in our office, we're thinking, well, what's really missing here? You've got potentially Delaware County-based environmental offenses, violations being addressed completely by state entities, whether it's a state regulatory agency or the state attorney general, but there's no Delaware County-based law enforcement entity that's engaged. And that's the really kind of interesting part of being in this space. The Delaware County District Attorney's Office has the capacity to more proactively try to identify where environmental crimes are happening, and and we have the capacity to develop deeper relationships with the municipalities, with the nonprofit community in Delaware County, et cetera, where the state entities are just spread too thin to be able to do that consistently. So in that capacity, we can complement and augment the resources that already exist at the state level. And increasingly, what I'm finding is we play an important role in intergovernmental coordination. So we're working with this county solicitor's office and maybe the DEP and the state attorney general's office, or even as well outside attorneys, and it's the district attorney's office that's providing all of that coordination and sort of hopefully accelerating the process. And then lastly, we have, I think, a better capacity to highlight and focus on environmental injustice in Delaware County in a way that the state entities are just spread too thin to do. So what are we seeing in Delaware County mostly so far? And like I said, the unit's still pretty young, and the kind of shutdown didn't help during this pandemic. but in any case, of all of those environmental statutes I showed you in my assessment so far, these are the ones that are probably most frequently the focus of cases that we hear about. And what that looks like, which is, Sue, not surprising to you, I think I took this photo with doing a pollution tour with Sue, but these are the types of kind of complaints that we tend to get the most. So this is what I guess environmental crime so far looks like in Delaware County. But not surprising to anybody, those kinds of issues or environmental offenses aren't really evenly distributed across Delaware County. And I found honestly that these statistics sort of encapsulate the impact of environmental offenses and environmental crimes better than I could, just, recounting what we see. But from a more macroscopic view from across the US, these statistics kind of drive home the point. I don't need to read each one of these, but they drive home the point that environmental crimes, and I don't even want to just limit it to environmental crimes because all pollution isn't illegal, right? Firms, organizations are permitted, acquire permits from regulatory entities that allow them to pollute. But 11.2 African-American children compared to only 2.3% of white children suffer from lead poisoning. And the last statistic kind of just blows my mind, although it shouldn't, that 56% more of African Americans suffer from pollution relative, to their consumption, whereas white people are exposed to 17% less pollution than their consumption generates. So with that as context, I wanted to acknowledge gratefully that both, as I'm sure that both the Department of Environmental Protection and the federal EPA incorporate environmental justice in their policy making and their approaches generally. So the DEP, this is the DEP's definition of environmental justice areas, taking into account individuals living below the poverty line, as well as the percentage of individuals of color. And using that definition, or with that definition, recognizing that definition, what you see here is a map of Delaware County, and the pink reflects the environmental justice areas according to that DEP definition. So zooming in a little bit, zooming into just this area along the Delaware River, where there is a pretty high intensity of polluting industries. For just looking at that zone, I then took a look at the EPA's, the federal EPA's in environmental justice index for that zone that I just showed you along the river. And the EPA's environmental justice index takes into account a different, it's kind of based on a different algorithm that balances both pollution parameters or pollution factors like various air toxic assessments, particulate matter, ozone, lead, traffic, proximity to Superfund sites and hazardous waste facilities, and they correlate that, the proximity to these environmental factors, to attributes in the community, such as the percentage of people of color, the percentage of people with a certain level of education, the percentage of children and senior citizens and English or non-English speakers, etc. So a whole demographic profile. And from and they use those all of those sets of parameters to develop an index. So what you see here is for all of these environmental parameters, correlating to that Delaware River area that I showed you, how can I put this? Sorry, I'm not articulating this well. In that zone, the population is at the top, is at the 89th percentile for example, particulate matter. So the high numbers in this case are bad. That means compared to everywhere else in the state, if you're looking at the state percentile column, everywhere else in the state is either has a, for example, particulate matter 2.5 value or threshold that's lower than, that's equal to or lower than that stretch along the Delaware River. So the high numbers in this case are not good. And then if you zoom in even closer and just focus on Chester City, the numbers are even higher. So Chester City is at the top, the 90, within the 90 to 100% percentile for the entire state for all of these pollution parameters. So why does this happen? And that's not surprisingly a complex series of issues. And the reason I raise this is because while the district attorney's office is not a policymaker, we're not legislators, it's still important to understand, to the extent we can, the origin of environmental injustice, and that should help focus us, and it should help kind of frame how we view prosecuting and how we try to uncover more environmental crimes. You know, and I want to be mindful of my time. All right, I think I can speak a little bit to this, but
at least another 15 minutes.
yeah, so I'm good. Right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, but a little bit. You know, in the market dynamics are interesting because, well, discriminatory citing is maybe speaks for itself, but I will say that where communities have unequal or perceived less political power, organizations, polluting industries are going to find less resistance if they try to cite their facilities in those communities. Interestingly, citing a facility, for example, on the border of two different jurisdictions is also a strategy that sort of creates impediments for communities who want to oppose or challenge the citing of that facility there because it's straddling two different jurisdictions. That's another citing strategy that polluting industries have used in the past. The market dynamics are interesting. You know, both businesses are going to be looking for less expensive real estate to site their facility potentially. And so they're going to be drawn to communities where that are lower, where the real estate's lower in cost and therefore may include a higher population of people of color or minorities. Unequal regulation. So I read several studies that show that that in communities that are deemed to be affluent, a violating plant is more likely, a plant that's violating its permit is more likely to be shut down. It takes around 20% longer for hazardous waste sites in communities where there are a greater population of people of color to be shut down. So there, at least what I've read is there's historically been unequal regulation in communities in low income areas. So what is the Environmental Crimes Unit? What is our team? What are we trying to achieve? But I didn't tell you at the top of this presentation is that the Environmental Crimes Unit is me. I don't have a team of lawyers with which I work. But that said, I don't, the reality is there really is a team at the office, and it's, and beyond for that matter. So I put the DA at the top of the list here because he really is committed to growing this unit and tackling environmental crimes. He's a phenomenal advocate, and he really does believe in this unit. I meet with him every 2 weeks to talk about what we're doing, to strategize. So he is really committed to this. And I also wanted to identify that it's a multidisciplinary team of lawyers that kind of focus and work together. So I am regularly working with the deputy DA who's in charge of investigations, and his focus is largely in white collar crime and government corruption issues, as well as the chief of all of our civil actions as well. So at a minimum, I'm working with those two teams. And then all district attorney's office have an investigative arm, which is the criminal investigation division, and those are the detectives. So in terms of investigations, RCID is a phenomenal resource. And I'll also work with readily the investigative teams in the Department of Environmental Protection and Fish and Boat Commission. They are well trained to address hazardous sites and toxics. I mean, that's their primary scope. So I will absolutely work closely with them, and good relationships with both of those agencies is really paramount for us. And then I'm in regular contact with the AG's office for large cases that might exceed our capacity. If that were to happen, we can refer the case to the Office of the Attorney General's office, which has phenomenal special agents as well to do investigations, and we would work collaboratively with the AG's office. And then lastly, we also work with outside environmental lawyers, some of whom are part of non-governmental organizations like the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, but others are private firms who do environmental law. So while on the one hand, having one person in the environmental crimes unit is a little bit misleading, because the breadth of resources is actually pretty phenomenal. And it's just been a really fabulous opportunity to work with all of these people. The toolkit, this is not unique to the environmental crimes unit, but I just wanted to frame this out. This is how the work gets done once a case gets referred to the DA's office and an investigation would ensue. We have these tools in our toolkit. And then the remedies are defined by statute. So while good creative lawyering can expand that and kind of drives what charges you're going to file, the remedies for environmental crimes are really kind of varied, and putting your case together and figuring out what charges you're going to file is oftentimes, it is not oftentimes, but it is absolutely informed by the types of remedies that are the most beneficial to the community who's been impacted. For example, a lot of the statutes, the remedies in a lot of the statutes are fines that go into a state like environmental fund, which is fine and good, but that may not be the best remedy for an individual community that's been impacted. So how cases get charged is really informed by the remedies that are going to be the most beneficial given the crime. And this is my last slide, but I just wanted to underscore that the approach that we are taking necessarily involves collaboration and cooperation with so many different groups, and this kind of goes back to the very first comment that I made, that DCVA has been unbelievable and supportive and really helpful in identifying where what parts of Delaware County are and have been at most risk for environmental crimes. But developing collaborative relationships with all of these groups is critical, and it'll be a lot easier when the shutdown is not still in force, because I spend a lot of my time on Zoom meetings, and once we can all get back together again, in-person meetings, community groups. So I really appreciate the outreach from anyone in Delaware County who has a concern about environmental crimes. And I wanted to, I think what was mentioned earlier was, I think Jaclyn, I think what you were alluding to in the introduction was one of the effort that we're focused on with DCVA regarding illegal dumping. And we're really trying to make inroads, working closely with DCVA, Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful, the municipal officials, the local judicial system, to shine a light on illegal dumping, to figure out how to hopefully get additional resources to tackle that. But it's an ongoing process, and I love your feedback on strategies that you think might work. But the DA's office really wants to be a partner to the community groups and to the rest of law enforcement to shine a light on illegal dumping and try to make some inroads in that respect. I'm going to actually, yeah, I guess I'm a few minutes early, but I'm going to actually stop. That's my thank you slide and my contact information. But does anyone, if anyone has questions or even, thoughts, recommendations, or where you see the need, or if you have ideas about how the DA's office can make an impact or support what you're doing, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Melissa. It was always great to hear from you, and hopefully people do have some questions. There was a comment in chat from Anthony Bastian, if I'm saying that correctly, and it says, can your office instrument dumping areas, for example, use camera to find people dumping in Delco in known spots?
Right. So can we do that? So the immediate answer is no, we can't. Not right at the, that's not part of the immediate toolkit. But, one of the many conversations that we've had with Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful and DCVA is how, as a team, we can elicit more funding for cameras like that. Now, certainly, as I think a lot of you may know, that Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful has a grant program in place already that will provide cameras, which are great for some facilities that are not high traffic, or some locations that are not high traffic locations, because they're motion triggered cameras. But I think, the DA's office does have the capacity to file for grants to fund law enforcement programs. For example, there's a gun, there's a program in Chester aimed to reduce gun violence, for which the DA's office was able to get a grant. So, that's one of the areas that we're exploring. So that's kind of a long answer. That's not something the DA's office can do out of pocket, but I'm interested in working with the community to look at how we can leverage our office to help bring resources to issues like that.
If there are others that have questions and you want to take yourself off mute, feel free. There were 2 other comments in the chat.
I think Peter had a question. Peter Poulineus.
Good. He said, can you provide some practical first call advice for reporting dumping, stream pollution, etc.?
Yes. You know, you mean, I think the question refers to if we, like, let's just say I'm living someplace where it looks like I'm suspicious that there's illegal dumping happening, or I know there's illegal dumping happening. Photos are great. And I would, actually just call me. Just call me. If you have photos, that's fantastic. But you can just call and share what you know. I wouldn't want to suggest anything that might put anybody at risk. In any given site, you don't know what's there, and I wouldn't ever encourage anyone to go investigate. But we can. Every case is kind of different, so I would call my mobile. You see my mobile on the screen. Until I don't know, further notice, I'm mostly working from home, and I've got my mobile with me all the time. Call me. I mean, just remember, I'm paid to serve you, so I work for you. And even if you have a question and you're not sure, it's okay, just call. But photos are always really great, and obviously an address so we know where it is that you're talking about. I know I don't know if that's a particularly helpful answer, but if there's something specific, that you're concerned about.
Well, this is Peter. I just wanted to jump in. That question came from me, but I haven't done it very much, but I did see an event. I guess it was actually runoff going into a stream from a whole house washing firm that was obviously bleach, sodium hypochlorite. And I walked it down to the stream, saw it going into the stream. So I actually called the DEP hotline, and they said, gee, call 911. So you haven't, and I thought, wow, this is this real?
So, that's interesting. The other, well, okay, so I'm glad that's a helpful. The other agency, if that had happened and you called me, I would probably, not to take away from DEP because they do have jurisdiction over that, but I might have called, my first call might have been Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, because Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission has jurisdiction over the waterways of the Commonwealth. Yeah, period, their state. And like I said, DEP does also, but in contacting both of them is fine, but my guess is that Fish and Boat might have the capacity to send somebody out there right away. So you certainly could call me, in which case I would probably call Ron Avancho at Fish and Boat Commission. And also follow up with DEP. I really, because I know that both entities are spread thin. So in the meantime, we can, depending on the site, we can also have one of our own detectives, one of the CID detectives go out there. we need to have evidence of it happening. But Fish and Boat has the capacity then to do the kinds of lab testing for the water to demonstrate what's happening. They can look at the impact on the fish and like water wildlife as well. So I would absolutely loop them in as well. Is it something that's ongoing as far as you know?
No, that was just a short-term event. And I actually did call 911 and they rolled fire trucks. I couldn't stick around to see what happened. I told them, where the washing was occurring and where it was going into the creek. But I think that's an appropriate answer for a major obvious release, because I do think, well, DEP said they do have some training with regard to that, and they can call out hazmat team. In other words, if it's active major, this was something that I had a lot of trepidation making the call, because I knew they were going to find it hard to assess. So, sodium hypochlorite going into the creek may or may, at that level, may or may not kill fish, right? We all know, it's going to take some careful assessment. I didn't think the fire departments would have the patience to do that. They might be able to go out and tell them to cease and desist. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and as far as you know, that's not something that could be recurring now and again as part of their business practice.
Oh, I think it undoubtedly occurs now and then with,
I mean, maybe offline if you want, like, if you can provide me more information, then
okay.
it's something that I would I have pretty regular conversations with Fish and Boat.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I would want to touch base with them, ask them what they know about that site historically, and what you're telling me allows us to maybe, because like you said, and Sue, you've told me a million times, it's one thing to know, I know this is I know this crime is happening, and I even think I might know who's doing it. I've heard this a lot from like township managers. I know there's illegal dumping and I have a pretty good idea who's doing it. It's a whole different story to be able to catch the crime actually happening, and so that you have a chance of prosecuting it. And that's a whole, which is why the cameras are so helpful. But at least what you're telling me gives us a focus for kind of monitoring if we can do something like that.
Melissa, I have a question.
Yes.
It's Ken Hemphill with the Whetstone Coalition. I'm presenting later, and I was going to just touch on this briefly, but I wonder if your office has any proactive ability. Like, there's a 6-acre dump, unpermitted, historically abandoned dump on the premises of Don Guinella, which the Whetstone Coalition is focused on preserving as a park. That dump has really not been thoroughly tested, and it is no doubt discharging something. Some chemicals are present, as reported by the developer, but he has a real interest in not presenting or not revealing, everything that's in that dump, because he wants to get his development approved. And he's not proposing any development for those 6 acres. He's leaving it abandoned, and he's going to cap it with a geotextile. But as Darren LeBrake presented in one of the meetings, that dump is no doubt discharging its effluent into a receiving stream just about 20 feet from the northern boundary of the dump. So I'm wondering if your office has any authority to say, like, we need an independent agency to come in and test this dump thoroughly to make sure that there's nothing in there that would cause a potential hazard for people downstream or for any theoretical houses that ever got built there. So
has anyone reached out to DEP on that, or has DEP provided, responded to requests in that capacity?
DEP, they haven't been very helpful, and they're swamped, and There's a big backlog. So
Huh.
the Delaware Riverkeeper Network is working with us, and we've had them reach out to DEP, and we really have had no joy.
That's not
Oh, right. You are working with Delaware River Network. Yeah, you know what? I don't know that much about this issue, but I probably should reach out to Delaware Riverkeeper Network and can we talk in more
Sure.
detail
Should I
about
give
this?
you a call next week?
Sorry?
Should I give you a call next week on yourself?
Yeah, to figure out, it's like I said, well, no, I mean, to figure out where we might be able to fit in to push this along, because the challenge that I'm thinking about here is, so the developer owns that parcel
Yes.
where the dump is
That
now,
piece.
where the dump's located, but I understand why he doesn't want to touch it. So the question would be, okay, I see. So we don't know who the original, well, whatever. We
Melissa?
don't know who the original perpetrator is, right? There's no way.
Melissa, this is,
Well, the Diocese of Philadelphia is the original perpetrator.
Oh, okay. So anyway, right. Yes, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, Melissa, the Archdiocese was the original perpetrator, and they've been dumping back in there since, I believe, the 70s. So I just wanted to answer that for you.
Yeah. So now the question is proving that, right? So.
And as Darren LeBrake pointed out in his presentation in a meeting before the Concord, or for the Marple commissioners, he said that the test wells that they dug were really woefully inadequate to determine whether or not anything hazardous in that site could be a problem.
Who dug the test wells?
The developer's consultant, I think it was Princeton Hydro.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
Sorry?
Not sure what that was.
No, Alan was going to say something, and I accidentally went to mute someone else, and I hit his button, so he should come back on in a second.
Okay, so I think I'm back on. So I was going to suggest we just kind of ask you guys to take that discussion further offline, because I know we have a couple other questions. I know Scott Mates had a question. I know we only have a few more minutes, so I just wanted to kind of move it along.
I'm gonna actually call on Robin Mann next, because she's been waiting to get a comment and a question. So Robin, if you want to unmute yourself.
And then Scott, and I think those will be our final two questions, unless we have a little bit more time.
Yep.
Thanks. Well, I was just curious as if Delaware County has the legal authority to install its own air monitors if they're not sure that the self-reporting is reliable at an industrial site.
Right. So if there, it's an interesting question. Can I imagine a scenario where we would, not likely, it's kind of the same scenario. It's kind of the same construct, I guess, as the cameras for identifying illegal dumpers. So, until and unless the DA's office opens an investigation, would installing air monitors be part of an investigation of a specific alleged crime? I don't know. The DA's office, because we haven't done that before. I probably not. But is there a way that we can work in the community groups, and other entities to help kind of advance efforts for funding for that? I think that there are ways we can as a community partner in that respect. It's a good question. I don't want to say No, absolutely not. You know, one of the things that's so interesting to me is that the price of technology, the cost of technology has come down so much, and using that smartly as a tool to identify crimes is a really makes a lot of sense to me. But I also am very aware of, you know, the limited resources we have as well. So I don't, you know, I think it's worth some creative thinking and teaming. And I know that's a pretty ambiguous answer, but I think it's.
No, thank you. That's great. Thank you. I'll follow up.
Please. Yeah.
Hi, this is Scott Mates. Cobb's Creek, the lower Cobb's Creek, and when I was in charge of the tag for the Superfund site Clearview, as a neighborhood liaison, I poured over, there was like 3 filing cabinets full of old documents, and I found in it that actually the lower Cobb's Creek was an unpermitted section of creek. That means it was you can dump unlimitedly in it. It was unpermitted. And I think I may have seen that in a newer document that we were handling too. I was wondering if that was still the case. That was a couple of years ago now. And what can be done about that? It used to be that I would suppose sewage, or, you know, there were factories and stuff down there. But it may still have that status now. What can be done about that? Can it be looked into?
The honest answer is I don't know what its status is. I do know that the Pennsylvania Clean Streams Law prohibits dumping into waterways of the Commonwealth, and doesn't distinguish some waterways from others depending on a permit status. So all the waterways, even groundwater, which is kind of unique to Pennsylvania, all waterways are protected under that law. So I can't give you an answer, except that I would like to learn more about what you're describing, so that maybe I could give you a better answer.
Yeah. Now those documents stretched from the 70s up until the 2000 or so, and then we had some newer stuff.
Yeah.
But it didn't surprise me at all that was the status of the Cobbs, because it's a bi-county stream. It's on both sides. It was where Clearview was located, right on the border. It is traditionally where Delaware County and Philadelphia County both would push things and do things because of the bi-county nature there. It's like kind of the edge of the frontier or something like that. And it was actually the lowest portion of the city down there. So it's not a surprise at all. But it may still be in effect. I haven't heard of anywhere where it was repealed. And actually, the whole creek down there has suffered for many. I was the caretaker of the Bluebell Tavern at Woodland Avenue, and they called that can I say this? The ass of the park, the Fairmount Park system. It was known as before because it was the very bottom. And then you went even further down the Cobbs, and it's just a forgotten area. And it stretches all the way back to actually the Civil War. But I won't get into that because I could get into that very deep. So it's not a surprise that was the case, and it very well may be somehow, or maybe that's been changed. And we all know that there's laws on the books now, but it did apparently supersede some of those laws for a while anyway, if not now.
Give you a real quick answer to that. The way water pollution laws are set out, there is no presumption of ability to pollute. There's a presumption of no ability to pollute, like Melissa was saying. So if you don't have a permit, then you're not allowed to pollute. So somebody who is doing what they always did and has never been hassled about it by the government authorities continues to do it, and the stream may be going downhill as a result of that, but it doesn't make any of that conduct legal. And in fact, if a citizens group wanted to sue a landowner for allowing that to occur, they could.
Yeah.
And DEP could seek enforcement action if they chose to, and it probably could be considered potentially criminal if someone has been doing it for 30 years and is ignoring requests to stop from DEP. I don't know. It's very common. 20 years is not a long time for a site that has problems to continue without being threatened in a really meaningful way. Very common.
Yeah, I want to wrap this up, but that document definitely came out of the era after the EPA was established and after many laws were passed. It was still listed as that. Whether it still is, that's a question, and that's all I have to say.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
For everything. And obviously your contact information is here. A round of applause. Be virtual applause.
Hope it was helpful.
One hand wave.
Yes.
One hand clap.
Right.
Thank you for your indulgence, everyone. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely it was. So we have scheduled a break. We're going to start back up at 10:30 if people want to walk away, or obviously you're more than welcome to stay on here and chat, but that is entirely up to you. But we have 10 minutes.
Melissa, have you prosecuted anyone yet? Has the Environmental Crimes Unit prosecuted anyone to date?
No, we have a couple of cases that we're looking at, but not fully developed. We've had some that we've just never have gone to prosecution. They were resolved. We got involved and they were subsequently resolved before there was any need for prosecution. And then there were several that we're looking at, but no, not yet.
Well, in a way you did, because if they gave in to you, in a certain sense, you won the case.
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch that.
I'm saying in a certain sense, you did prosecute them because they changed their habits because of the threat of prosecution. So in a way, you won the case.
All right, I'll take
By
that.
making them change,
That's a fair way to look at it.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I mean,
one of the challenges, honestly, and this is why I really appreciate the invitation to talk, but one of the challenges that I'm still pretty sure most people in Delaware County and even a lot of community groups, and for that matter, probably other departments within county government, don't know that there's an environmental crimes unit. So that's one challenge. I think another challenge is that I don't know, you probably can speak to this better than I can, but the sense that I have, even in the short time I've been there, is that folks are just used to nothing changing and don't even bother calling the DEP hotline anymore. And there's just kind of this sense of resignation. And it's taken us a while to kind of develop even sort of an infrastructure and relationships and trust, even within emergency services and DEP and Fish and Boat, to develop the collaborations with the different community groups where we could start to carve out where this office's role can be most beneficial, so that we can start to uncover these environmental crimes rather than just waiting for somebody to call our office.
How many people are in there?
Me. You're looking at her.
One person, one man show, so to speak.
I'm a one-man show, but like I said, the reality is that when it comes to doing the work, I work with 2 to 3 other prosecutors. One is in like white collar crimes and investigations. The other is the lead on the civil actions. I work with Fish and Boat and DEP. Like their investigative resources are exceptional. They're trained for toxic and hazardous sites. Our own investigators are an incredible team. And then in some instances, I'm working with the Attorney General's office. So it is just me, but in reality, the success of the unit is really dependent on its capacity to work across jurisdictions, to other agencies, to work with the municipalities and their resources, and obviously with the community groups and the nonprofits. So yes, it's just me, but I never feel like our footprint is small.
You should advertise if you think people, see, the thing is, I heard of the environmental crimes unit almost the first day Jack took office. It was in the paper.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's
if
right.
people don't know, they should try and get into the media so that people can see that it exists. You know?
Yeah, I appreciate your point.
Excuse me, Melissa, this is Kate Goddard. That was really, really interesting, and I'm so excited that your office exists. I sent you a message in the chat if you wouldn't mind taking a little look at it privately. Thank you.
Oh, will do.
Melissa, I don't know what your plans are for today, but obviously you're welcome to stay on sustainably.
Yeah, no, you have some updates that I really want to hear about.
Okay, fantastic.
So I'll have myself on mute, but like I said, just in keeping with the point that I just made, the success of the unit is, in my opinion, it's so dependent on working with and being in touch with the community groups and the municipal officials, because it's a team effort. So no, your agenda is great, and I'm staying on because I want to be updated and I want to stay engaged.
Wonderful. Okay.
So thank you for putting together such a great agenda.
Well, it's only as great as the people that join us. And actually, let's see. Well, we have a few minutes. Give you a few more minutes of doing whatever you like. But if there's anybody on here that wants to share how long they've been a member of DCVA, or just to say hi, feel free. And if you are sharing, remember you're on mute. I think Tom was trying to share. I saw him talking, but I was sure if he's talking to us or if he was talking to someone in his household.
I want to say that this is Kate again. I think it's wonderful that a lot of people were able to join us who normally can't join us, but Zoom is allowing them to do so. So it's great to see Tom and Carl. So hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Yes, very good point, Kate. Thank you.
Hey, this is Peter Puglianesi. I just wanted to, since we have open time, put in a little ad for next Saturday. The 9th annual Philly's West Suburbs Trail Summit is happening 9 o'clock to noon. Anyone who needs information, let me know. Be happy to share it. Virtual, of course.
Thanks, Peter.
Can you put that information in chat?
Will do.
I just wanted to let people know that we have lots of workshops and events coming up. If you want to check our website at events, we have a virtual rain garden program that is being put on. And we also have the fireside chat town hall meetings where we're reaching out to the municipalities and the residents. And we want to hear from you what your concerns are, where you feel the environmental issues in your own unique neighborhood. Each municipality will have its own evening. That way we can concentrate on one or two of the communities at a time. And all of those days are listed on our website.
Yep, good point.
This is Scott Mates again. I just want to add the comment to what I was talking about before. That law or that the it appears it was a law that the creek is on the Cobb's Creek is unpermitted, so to speak, as it was quoted in the documents that I was reading, may date to even before the EPA, although it was in the documents after the EPA and, and their new regulations and all, and quite recent, but it could date to when both Philadelphia and Delaware County were thinking about sewer discharges. We all know that these sewer lines run down to the creek area. Philadelphia has a big treatment plant. Delaware County does too, I think, in Folsom or something. But anyway, it could have been like that for that to handle those kind of things, and that need has passed. So that may be the origin of a long time thing. So who knows what we'll find if it's still on the books or anything.
Okay, thanks, Scott. All right, well, I have right on the dot 10:30. And before I introduce our next speaker, I also wanted to thank Rosemary Jaclyn, who has been a board member for many years and now is emeritus board member who is here today. And she has helped a lot for many years in terms of getting information out to members, annual meeting. So Rosemary, thank you. She, walked away. I don't know if she can hear me. I just noticed I don't see her in the screen. I'll say it again when she comes back. Also, oh, there she is. Did you hear me, Rosemary? You did? Okay. I know you can hear from distances even if we don't see you on the screen. Also, I forgot to say that this event, all the speakers today are a result of our Vice President, Alan Samuel, putting it together. I'm just a speaking head. He did all the work. So I was remiss not saying that this morning. And he's been doing this for several years now, actually organizing and putting together the speakers. So thanks to Alan for such a great agenda. And so with that said, I see Josh has joined us. And so we're going to begin. Just so everyone knows, we should be wrapping up in about 2 hours, not too long. We do have 3 official speakers and then just short updates at the end. And of course, if we get through things faster, we will end sooner. So Josh has spoken with us a number of times, of course, because of the work DCVA is involved in regarding the landfills in the lower portion of the watershed. So Josh Barber is a remedial project manager for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. He's within the Office of Superfund Site Remediation in Philadelphia. He received his bachelor's in geography from the University of South Carolina and has been working for the Superfund program for 19 years now. Time flies, doesn't it, Josh? He spent his first 4 years working for the Federal Facility Restoration and Reuse Office at EPA at their headquarters. And he has been working on both privately owned and federal facility Superfund sites now for the past 15 years. He is currently responsible for the management and oversight of the lower Darby Creek area and the Havertown, and I forget the acronym, PCP, Superfund site, but I'm sure he'll tell us all about them. And then in addition to his duties as an RPM, he focuses on innovative site characterization, construction management, environmental justice, and community engagement. Josh, I will turn it over.
Hey, do you want me, can I share my screen? I know I had sent the presentation, but share it. Okay. All right.
You should be able to.
All right.
So much easier than, advancing the slides for you and
Truly. All right. So can you see my presentation now?
you're good.
All right, cool. So yeah, so and do you want me to
Really quick, if you can go on to run, there you go.
yes. No problem. So you can see like the regular slide deck, not the background, like the offsite stuff. Okay.
Right.
So and I've got about 40 slides. There's a lot of figures and pictures in here. So I can't see any questions. So if I figured what I could do is kind of go through, there's 3 different parts of Lower Darby, and I can kind of pause at each one and then and that way we don't have to wait all the way until the end, and then we can finish any other Lower Darby questions up and then talk about Havertown after that. So I think if that works for everybody, I'll get going. And as Jaclyn said, my name's Josh. I am the project manager for these 2 sites, and there's a lot to cover, so I'm just going to get right into it. I don't have a lot of far back historical information on these 2 sites. I'm presuming that there's some level of familiarity. If there's not, I'm more than happy to answer those questions now. And we can also provide supplemental information, or there's stuff on the website. And I know that, a lot of folks with DCVA are familiar with the background as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get at that information. So Lower Darby is made up of 2 different sites. There is the Clearview landfill, and just for reference, this is I-95. This is the John Hines Refuge. So the airport is to the south, and we have here this is 84th Street, Hook Road, and Lindbergh Boulevard. And for reference, here's the refuge environmental center. So Clearview and Fulcroft are the 2 main sources that are making up the Lower Darby Creek site. There's other industrial properties in between and upstream and downstream, but for Lower Darby, we're dealing with the contamination that's potentially related to Clearview and Fulcroft specifically. And it's broken down into 4 different parts, and we call them operable units in Superfund, OUs for short. So OU1 is Clearview, and it's all the soil and waste that's there that we're addressing. Fulcroft is down here. And actually, Fulcroft is being managed by a group of responsible parties with EPA and DEP oversight. That's the Commonwealth Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. The groundwater for Clearview is a separate operable unit. That's going to be a separate cleanup plan. And then we have all the aquatic environments that are between Clearview down through the Hines Refuge all the way down to the Delaware, which really is becoming, just recently we've classified it as OU4. It's always been its standalone thing, kind of technically tied to OU2 because of our settlement agreement with the responsible parties for Fulcroft, but we're going to be making that officially operable unit 4. And when I talk about the site, whether it's Clearview or Fulcroft or Havertown, the site is not only the source area, but it's wherever contamination has come to be located. So real quick, this is the winding path of Superfund. It is a long and winding road. These are the major milestones. And what I just wanted to show everybody, so, the site was listed back in 2001, and the majority of the site, OUs 2, 3, and 4, all have completed remedial investigations, and we're now in the feasibility studies for all of those. And I'm going to go into details on every one of these sites. Once I get through OU1, I'll pause for the first questions. After that, we'll move through our proposed cleanup plan, and then selecting the remedy, designing the remedy, and then implementing it. And implementing the cleanup is where we are for OU1, which was the Clearview landfill, soils and waste. And that remediation has been going on since 2017. So it's a long process. Sometimes things can be done quickly in certain areas, but that's kind of where we stand right now. And then we move into basically maintaining the cleanup that we construct or implement, and then eventually, facilitating site reuse and deleting sites off the MPL eventually. That's the penultimate goal at the end of all this. So I'm sorry if my little bar here is kind of blocking. I'll move this over a little bit. Maybe you can't see that, but I can. So OU1 for Clearview has several main parts. I've summarized them here. One is residential yard cleanup, which is by and large done. We've remediated about 200 residential parcels. We have about 10 left to go. COVID did play a part in delaying that work. We expect to get the remaining work done on that this spring into summer at the latest. We're also excavating contaminated soil waste from the city park that's adjacent, basically between the neighborhood and the landfill. And I have a map to kind of show this. We're also building an evapotranspiration cover to cap all of the waste and contaminated soil that's left in place. We are stabilizing and reinforcing the stream banks to prevent erosion and exposure of the landfill contents or contaminated soil. And we also have business relocation that's been completed. Leachate collection and treatment is called for in the Remedial, although that's going to be changing, and I'll touch on that. And then we'll have, like I said, long-term operation and maintenance of the site once the cleanup is completed or kind of built. All right, why am I not skipping here? Next, there we go. Okay, so and if at any point you can't see my slides, let me know. I'll move this out of the way, sorry. So this is the landfill cleanup progress. So just to orient yourself, Lindbergh Boulevard is down here. This is 84th Street and Lindbergh Boulevard runs along this way. So in this map, north is to the right, pointing towards Center City. So everything that's in pink here are the residential areas that we've addressed as part of the cleanup of the yards. Not every property in there was included, but that's just kind of to give you a sense. Everything here in green are areas that have been fully restored after remediation. So we've excavated contaminated soil, trash, and we put it up on the landfill where we're basically building the landfill up or out, as it were. This one area here that's in the hashing, this is one area where the ET cover was constructed late in November of last year, but we didn't get to plant the trees. So these will be planted. Right now, the site is shut down for winter break, but we are actually remobilizing on Monday, weather pending. And this will be one of the things that we hit before the trees that we plant, which are tree cuttings, wake up in the spring. So by the end of March, we should have this area planted. This area here in gray is where we will continue our work, which is essentially taking material that we're excavating from other areas and placing it here in slopes and providing stability benches so that we can consolidate all the material and then put the ET cover on top. And for those who don't know, the ET cover stands for evapotranspiration, and it's an innovative cap in that it's only soil, but it's a soil that has the right properties that let the soil hold on to precipitation, act as a sponge, prevent or minimize the water from getting into the waste below. And then the trees, which is basically, we're planting trees 7 foot on center over the entire ET cover until those trees use up that water through respiration and or the water in the soil evaporates naturally. And it's meant to kind of replace, it's meant to replace in certain situations, a typical landfill cap with a synthetic liner that's included in there. So we were hoping that in this construction season, it's going to start in February, we'll have this area done by the end of 2021. And another big component that we're working on is stabilizing the stream banks here. We've already completed all the stream bank work up here, and we're working our way down. I've got some photos of that. So we want to complete that work this year. And there's a large retaining wall that needs to be built so that we can complete the consolidation and waste placement here in what we call Area A. And that's what we would be doing next year. I don't know why this is so delayed. Next. All right. So just I wanted to touch on ICS, the hurricane that hit back in August. I mangle that name every time I say it, so I'm sorry. So during that hurricane, the site was substantially flooded. All of the low-lying areas around the landfill in the neighborhood, this was the hardest part hit of the city with regards to flooding. During that time, during the flood, while the waters were still high, we were able to collect water samples to see if there was any site-related contaminants, or really if there's anything that was present there that might be posing a risk to people who are walking in it, or if it was getting into homes and saturating home belongings or home structures. We also were able to sample residential properties after the floodwaters had receded. These were properties that either had been cleaned up, and so we knew the quality of the soil that was there because we put down new clean soil, or we had sampled these yards previously and they were already unimpacted by the site. And the long and the short of it is that we did a full risk assessment from the floodwaters. We found that there was no unacceptable risk, which is how we talk in Superfund terms. We have risk thresholds that we look at. And in fact, we were orders of magnitude below even getting close to our actionable threshold. There was little to no contaminants detected, site-related or otherwise, in the floodwaters, which is a good thing. That report is here on our website, that risk assessment. And all the properties that we sampled also did not have any evidence of site-related contamination showing up. So now what I wanted to do is provide some photos here. So I've got at the bottom, or and kind of on every photo I'm showing, there's a little, this is the site map, which you recognize, and then an arrow that's kind of pointing in the direction of perspective. So here we are, this is in the city park, and this is a temporary swale that will eventually be converted into a bioswale. And you can see the evapotranspiration cover that's being placed here on top of the exposed landfill contaminated soils. And we have 3 to 4 benches that are constructed intermittently as you go up the hill to provide stability and also to provide for access. Next. This is another perspective, kind of standing up on the landfill slightly, looking down. This is the homes that are, for those that are familiar, this is Angelo Place and Mars Place is over here. This is an area B where this is another example of this temporary swale we have that is conveying all of our stormwater down into this large basin here. We also, it's hard to see, it was part of the original design, but after the hurricane, we double checked it and modified it to, this is essentially a low berm that can serve also as the future bike path if the city decides to put that in the park, as they've said they were planning to do. This berm can help basically ensure that up until the point when the neighborhood gets flooded under certain extreme storm scenarios, that we can maintain not only the water, the runoff that's coming down from the landfill, but in the case of what happens usually with these floods is if the tide is coming in this way, you know, and the water breaks this way, I want to try and, never mind, I won't do it. So basically, the waters kind of break over into the site from Cobb's Creek, and then they travel down this way. And this low-lying berm here can help to keep that water out of the neighborhood as part of our stormwater management efforts. It's not something that's going to keep the neighborhood from being flooded under a 100-year or 500-year storm. In fact, it's usually somewhere between 20 to 50 years is when anything that we can do on site is exceeded. This is just before we broke. This is sitting on top of the landfill looking down. Here's the rec center, and this is the Eastwick neighborhood. You can see Philadelphia. And so this is an area over here that was restored last year. And this is the ET cover that's been constructed and where we are getting ready to install the trees. And these are the trees that we put on the ET cover. This is the same vantage point a few days later. So the trees are whips that are cut from 2 nurseries that we've been propagating since 2014, one that's on the landfill in an area that was remediated during a previous cleanup effort. And there's another nursery we have up near New Tripoli, Pennsylvania, on state game land property. And we're planting native cottonwoods, hybrid poplars, dogwood, willow. Primarily what we have on the landfill here is either the native cottonwoods or the hybrid cottonwoods. These are cuttings that are 4 to 5 feet in length. They're soaked in rooting hormone and mycorrhizal fungi in a solution after we cut them. They're dormant. We drill these holes. They're 7 foot on center. So these holes go down to the base of the ET cover. and they're backfilled. And then we have these tree tubes here that protect them until the trees are large enough that those covers can pop off, and then we'll just remove them eventually. I'm almost done with OU1. So I thought, you know, I showed this at the CAG meeting the other night, and I think that this is just a cool photo. So this is the area that we had restored previously. This is over here in Area C. And, you know, this was right after the storm in December. And we have here a couple of raptor perches that we've put in that can help us with controlling the varmint population as they try to nibble at the trees. So this is like the first time we ever had evidence of a raptor actually using our raptor perch, which was just a cool thing to see. So I thought that was a neat one to include. All right, next. So the other thing I wanted to go over is, so this is our staging area here. And one of the things that the biggest structure we're building along the creek now to stabilize it is where we have creek banks that are pretty much a sheer drop and down from the top of the bank down to the water at low tide is maybe a 10, 15, 20-foot drop. And some of our other features that we've done before won't work here, mud sills and things like that. So we're putting in what's called a log crib wall. And essentially it started at the base. It's these 8 by 16 or 8 by 20 they're basically like Lincoln log cabins without a top on them that are put into the bank after we excavate material, and then those are backfilled with rock, large stone, and then we're going to build them up taller on top. So eventually they'll be 15 feet approximately tall. Right now, most of them, the base of these goes below. These sections are actually being placed below the bottom of the creek bottom elevation. So we're basically digging down 4 feet below the bottom water or the creek bottom. And this is an example. So here we are along Darby Creek, kind of looking upstream, you know, and this is a really good vantage point of what we have. This has all been cut away. It used to be all the way over here, but the excavator is large that we need to use to load these features. So you can see all the trash and the contaminated waste and soil. It's pretty nasty stuff, depending on where you go. And so this area has been cleared, and then there's a berm that's built. The operator who's doing this work has become really skilled at working in this material. And there's native silty clay below the trash that we're using to basically create a berm along our work area. That area is then excavated and the water is pumped out, and then these features are put in as part of the base. So this is kind of stepping back a little bit. A couple days later from the previous picture, you can see we have this berm here that keeps the water out, and these structures have been put in. And again, the bottom of these is approximately 4 to 5 feet below the bottom of the creek right now. That's to provide long-term stability. And then we will build, as what they're doing up here, we'll keep building up, not with modular sections anymore, but it'll just be basically log by log by log. And we're using hemlock, which is a very rot-resistant tree that, you know, in and of itself should have 50 to 60 years of lifetime. But with the fact that they're getting constantly saturated with tide water or with the creek water going up and down, that should extend that lifespan far beyond that. This is a closer up view. You can see here, this is our berm, and, you know, we've got there's material, there's geosynthetic material that's put inside the logs to basically keep all the stone and material in there and to keep them from like kind of spreading out too far and kind of going through the cracks in the logs. And then we just build on top of that. So next steps for OU1, you know, we want to complete the residential yard cleanup. We want to complete Area B this year and the eastern bank of Darby Creek. We do also want to establish some land use controls for the landfill in the park to protect the integrity of the remedy. And we also need to develop what we call an explanation of significant difference, which is a decision document that is going to document that we are not going to be building the leachate collection trench and the engineered treatment wetlands that we originally had planned for as part of the record of decision for OU1. And the reason for that is because we're going to address what that leachate collection trench was supposed to address, which was partially water leaving the landfill leachate leaving the landfill and discharging into the creek bottom or off of the creek banks. Through our investigations as part of the groundwater operable unit 3, we have determined that there's water that's deeper than where the bottom of that trench was authorized to go in the OU1 record of decision. And there really isn't a point in putting in this trench. So the OU3 remedy will address all of this. It's going to essentially supersede that. And so that's something that I need to work on this year, is getting that ESD prepared so that we can document that as we're working on the preparations for the proposed plan for the interim remedy. So I'm going to stop right there and see if there's any OU1 questions. I don't have as many slides as for other parts of the site, so this should go a little bit quicker. I think I have until 11:30. Is that right? So we can kind of zip through these things, but I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, Josh, this is Alan. I'm not sure how we got, I messed up the timing, so you have about 20 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
So Cindy, that'll kind of, Cindy and Ken, that'll probably stretch you guys back a little bit, but no worries.
That's fine. I mean, we can, I can kind of gloss over a few things and hit the high points here. If there's, are there questions at all? For
there was one by Kate, but Kate, the question was answered now.
Oh, actually, it wasn't quite answered.
So, you want me to say it?
Yeah, go ahead, Jaclyn.
So Kate had typed in the chat, since the cover's on top, are there areas of landfill right along the creek where contaminants can still flow within the banks into the creek?
So technically, yes. I mean, the areas where we have stabilized, there's limited amount of leachate or water that's discharging. And the ET cover, as more and more of it is built, that should further reduce what's discharging to the creek. But there is approximately 1/3 of this landfill mass that is below the water table anyway, because it was built in the waterways of the wetland itself. So that cannot be addressed by anything we're doing right now. That's meant to be covered by OU3, which will be actually the OU3 cleanup, which I'll get into, is going to be split into 2 parts. One of it is to try and contain and prevent any further discharge from the entire perimeter of the landfill, wherever we have discharge occurring up into the creek bottom or out into the aquifer and other directions. But that would be, and then there'll be a larger plume cleanup for the last part of the groundwater, for the stuff that's kind of already gotten away from the landfill.
Hi, Josh. This is Scott Mates. It's great to hear that you weren't finding anything during that storm. I'd correct you for those cribs you're making. In this watershed, there'll be Swedish log cribs, so to speak, for our Swedish log cabin that we're known for. I'm glad that you're not using the leachate collection areas. They kind of always alarmed me, so that you found a better solution. That's really great. Behind the landfill along the creek there traditionally was a path. I know you're not installing paths, but would you think, because it was a really nice and idyllic spot where you were away from the city and you're against woods in Delaware County on their side of the creek. It's actually where the Darby and the Cobbs meet, that very few people have actually seen. And will there be room to put a path there eventually on top of these cribs or something?
So there will be so we have access roads that will basically be in concentric rings all the way up the landfill, wherever our benches are, including along the stream bank. So those, in theory, can also be having a dual use as a path. However, I think that this landfill is privately owned. So, we have court-ordered access to this property, but any type of use as an official bike path would need to be something that would have to be worked out between the property owner and if somebody wanted to work with them to open that up. If there's questions that people have about how it could intersect with the remedy, EPA can facilitate those conversations, but we aren't planning. So there will be roads and paths that we use, for maintenance. They could serve a dual use, but it's really up to the private property owner, just like any other property, as to whether or not they would want to grant anything like that.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Scott, we
I-
should move on. If
Yeah.
you have additional questions or comments, if you
Yeah,
can chat, and then we'll
okay.
see if we could catch up at the end, so we could cover
Thank you.
the Havertown.
Yeah. And I'm happy to follow up later with questions too. So I want to get to Havertown, but I want to talk real quick. So for Clearview, there's 3 other operable units. I'm not going to take that long to go through the rest. For Clearview OU3, we're in the middle of the feasibility study. I need to get a new contractor on board because our old contract expired. We have treatability studies ongoing, looking at different technologies for injection that can treat the contaminants that we have in groundwater, which primarily our big drivers are 1,4-dioxane, PFAS, and arsenic. I have plume maps for those, but essentially those, and primarily those are all in the aquifer that sits on top of the bedrock. We don't have much in the way of bedrock contamination, but it's a lot of contaminants that are in the coastal plain sediment aquifer. So this is the arsenic plume map. Here's the existing landfill boundary based upon our OU1 cleanup. You can see this, you know, these are lower level concentrations and these are higher level concentrations. This is the 1,4-dioxane plume. You can see that it's much larger. It extends all the way out to Penrose Plaza. Again, this is in the overburden. And then this is the PFAS plume, which is even more extensive. Lower level dispersion in certain areas, but you know, these are the big contaminants that we're trying to deal with. They're the main potential risk drivers. They do also discharge to the creek. We've done testing of the pore water, the interstitial pore space of the water within the sediment. We see site contaminants there. So that's another part that's kind of hard to map. It doesn't go under the creek and go over here at all. It's basically the creek is serving as a boundary. This is an example of these injections that we were testing out. You know, this is you know, the mixing tank, and then we have you know, hydraulic injection of these points to try and fill up the pore spaces in the subsurface with these materials. And this is one of the things where we're using something called plume stop, which is colloidal activated carbon. And the point here is not to look at each one of these. These are all of our different monitoring wells that are meant to monitor the quality of the water after the injection. So this line right here, so what you basically see here is a dip down from pre-injection conditions. We see a drop and then a rebound. So there's something that is positively happening with the PFAS with this material, but the question is, you know, we see this rebound and sometimes it's even higher. So, you know, what the feasibility study will be looking at is this really something that can be applied in this way, or is there a different way to apply this technology? Is it a technology that just isn't going to work for our situation? It's one of the things. So you see promising results, but there's more to be determined as to whether or not it will be really practicable. For the aquatic environments, this is OU4. We have our aquatic risk assessment that was finalized in December of last year. I'm working to get it up on our website. It has to go through legal review to make sure we don't have any personal privacy information. So that should be done soon. The tag through DCVA provided comments on this risk assessment report in August, I believe. So those comments did not result in any changes to this report, simply because my contract expired just when the other one was expiring for the groundwater. So those comments are in my possession. We've reviewed them and they're going to be addressed as we develop the feasibility study. But I'm just saying, for anybody who read the risk assessment reports or parts of it, and you notice that it's no different than the version that the tag originally reviewed, that is why. It wasn't being dismissed. It was simply a administrative challenge that I had with regards to our contracts. So in the aquatic environments, we're looking at everything soup to nuts, from Clearview in the waterways down through the Hines Refuge, all the way to the Delaware, where we've done sediment sampling, shallow and deep. We look at surface water, seep water. We've also done testing of fish and turtle tissue, as well as plant and invertebrate samples. And there's a whole host of contaminants. And really, it would be a meeting in and of itself, which I'm happy to do, to kind of go over what we found, because it's not the same everywhere as you would expect. We have multiple sources, both from Lower Darby and otherwise, that contribute to these different classes of contaminants. But the takeaway is that we have varying levels of risk throughout the area that we assessed. The greatest risks are from consumption of fish and turtle tissue. We have lower level risk in sediment, and we obviously also have potential ecological risks as well. Sediment is our primary human health risk driver, but also, like I said, fish and turtle tissue are probably the most likely ongoing exposure point, because we know people are fishing throughout the refuge and probably in the Delaware. And we have a host of risks depending on which type of ecological receptor you're looking at. Heavy metals for the plants. For the inverts, it's pretty much everything that we found because they're living right in it. Fish, it's the fish, birds, and mammals. It's kind of the things that you see, the bioaccumulative compounds like these pesticides and their derivatives, PCBs, and then some heavy metals. This is the aquatic sediment area that we studied. So again, it's basically everything throughout this area and these waterways is what we've been characterizing for quite a while. This figure is terrible to try and look at during a presentation because it's just kind of a lot. But my point is, one of the things that we really worked hard on with this risk assessment report is what we call the conceptual site model, and trying to understand what is the fate and transport of these contaminants. Where could they be coming from? Are there ongoing sources, or is it a relic? What are the mechanisms that are involved in the transport? What are the high concentration areas, so on and so forth. And the reason why I'm showing this here is there's a figure for each of our main risk drivers in the risk assessment report, and there's a long discussion that goes into all the details. This is for dioxins and furans, but this is kind of meant to represent what I would say the most important data points for consideration when we were looking at what is the fate and transport of these contaminants throughout the waterway. And the other thing I would mention is we are working with our EPA Office of Research and Development on some new kind of groundbreaking modeling that will model the transport of contaminants during flood events, whether it's 20, 50, 100, 500-year floods. And we're hoping that we can, one, apply that to other Superfund sites, but also for this feasibility study, use that to identify the areas where we can, where we potentially have the most release of contaminants during flood events, or the potential exposure of contaminants during flood events, and focus some of our remedial efforts in those areas. So the next step, I just need to take a drink here, I'm sorry.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Yes? Is there a question?
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. No, I was just filling in the space while you got some more.
Okay. So what we want to do kind of sounds like OU3. We're going to be working on the feasibility study this year, probably in the next year. Treatability study if it's warranted. This site is going to the EPA National Remedy Review Board, which is an entity that ensures consistency with these big, complicated Superfund sites. And the Remedy Review Board process was changed to happen sooner in the process, rather than happening at the remedy review or at the remedy selection stage. The Remedy Review Board, which is folks from EPA all across the country and headquarters, kind of discussing and critiquing and troubleshooting the site challenges. We're going to start that at the beginning of the FS. And there's the first meeting is actually going to be the last week of February. It's a virtual, and a part of the National Remedy Review Board, a big part is stakeholder participation. And that includes you, that includes the TAG, as well as the community down in Eastwick, the responsible parties for Fullcroft, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Interior, and DEP. So I sent invitations out to all of those stakeholders, including to DCVA and the TAG and Jaclyn, where during this meeting, we can have a separate session where stakeholders can give presentations, or written comments can be provided. And I'm working with every group, including DCVA with the tag, to see how they want that to work. And it doesn't need to be everybody, every stakeholder. It's not like if every stakeholder is doing a presentation, or if one is, everybody has to, that kind of thing. It's going to be a mix. One other interesting thing of note is that we had shared our fish tissue data with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and with the goal there being, hey, do you think, the existing fishing advisory should be updated based on this? They thought it was interesting, and they're going to be doing additional fish tissue sampling this year, is my understanding. And as I learn more about that, I will be happy to share that. All right, so I've got like 10 minutes left, I think, right? Are there any questions on the aquatic stuff, or on, basically, I just went over OU3 and OU4 all together. Are there any questions there?
I just have a comment, Josh. I think it's fascinating. I love those log cabins. This is Kate. It reminds me of the pilings that have been holding up the city of Venice, Italy for hundreds of years. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to mention. Sorry, I'll have to think about it.
That's fine. Think about
Josh,
it. Yes. Yeah.
There's also, did you remember, Kate?
No, sorry.
Okay. Also, Josh, somebody said, have you considered microbial restoration to address contaminants?
For groundwater, or for, well, I guess the answer would be yes. I mean, we will, and we are, both for OU3, we will look at if there's any naturally occurring microbes that either are there in sufficient populations, or if those can be enhanced, or if you can kind of, it's more challenging if you want to seed or inoculate the subsurface with those microbes, but certainly we are looking for anything like that. We've done some surveying, but we will, I think as part of the feasibility study, we're looking to see if there's anything there that can help enhance or be one of the main components for the treatment. Yes, absolutely.
Josh, I did remember my other question. Thank you. This is Kate again. So you mentioned that the creek was serving as a barrier, and that you actually weren't seeing any groundwater contamination on the far side of the creek, which is sort of ironic. So what that means is that the flowing water, is that sweeping away the contaminants downstream into the Delaware Bay on the, and thus that's why you're not seeing any contaminants on the west side?
So to answer your question, yes. So yes and no. Yes to your first question and no to your hypothesis. So yes, the groundwater that's discharging up into the stream bottom is going to be filling the interstitial pore space. And then depending on the tidal stage, you will have a flux of either water that's coming in and there's less discharge, but that water that's coming up through the sediment pore space will discharge to the creek water itself, and that would just be washed down as part of the overall flow. We haven't done a specific flux study yet. That is one thing that we're considering doing, just to see what the actual flux is between the groundwater, the sediment, the pore water, and the creek water. The reason why primarily, though, that we see that it's not coming up on the other side is just that the regional flow of groundwater is towards these creeks, right? And on this figure, the bedrock groundwater and regional groundwater flows north from the northwest towards the southeast anyway. And locally there's biased groundwater flow in the shallow aquifer towards the creek themselves. So it's kind of like there's head pressure from the landfill because it's a mound, so there is water that's at a higher elevation that's kind of pushing down and out, but it's to the point that it only really makes it into the creek, and then the prevailing aquifer flow directions countermand any further discharge or migration, kind of what would be ostensibly be up gradient flow going against the flow. It's not that that's impossible, it's just that we don't have that happening here.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Thanks, Josh.
No problem. So I got a few minutes left. The story with Fulcroft is that it's still in the feasibility study stage, and the PRPs are looking at how to address the landfill and the groundwater contamination. They're doing their own treatability studies. They're looking at landfill cover thickness. And this is just a representation of the extent of their furthest plume. None of this discharges to the creek. It all sits way well below the bottom. We don't have any discharge at Fullcroft from the groundwater plume itself, which is due in large part to the fact that there is this very thick layer of fat clay that underlies the refuge, which is one of the reasons why the refuge is there. It's one of the reasons why the impoundment is there. So I'll just leave it at that. There will be more to come on Fullcroft as we work with the PRPs to finish the feasibility study this year. So I'm sorry I'm not getting to Havertown with more time, because obviously a lot of you live in this area, you know this area. So I think folks know it pretty well, but just for reference, this is Lawrence Road, this is Eagle. This is the existing YMCA, former chewing gum factory. Here's the cap that we have on the former National Wood Preservers property. This is our existing treatment building here. And I have some maps to show the plume. So National Wood Preservers was a wood treater facility. The primary contaminants that we're dealing with here are dioxins and pentachlorophenol, that's PCP for short, which is a semi-volatile organic compound as well. We do have some heavy metals, but largely it's naphthalene, PCP, dioxins, some benzene, toluene, things along those lines. This is just a representation of, again, the extent of where our remedy currently exists. The contamination doesn't exist all along here, but we did have a secondary source area that was created and that we cleaned up a while back on this this township property. There was an old storm sewer or sanitary sewer that had another sewer line that everybody had forgotten about that transported the contamination from the site all the way down here. That was remediated in 2010. And so I just wanted to kind of show that, you know, these are all easements that we have for the pipeline work that conveys water that's collected from this area back up to the treatment plant. I'm going to hit this fast because I know you'll have questions, and I want to give you at least a few minutes because I think a lot will come out with questions if you have them. So we've been doing a lot of work at Havertown recently, in case you haven't heard. Had a lot of rain in 2018. Water table went up significantly. We had a resident on Rittenhouse Circle complain of a sheen and water in their crawl space. So throughout 2019, you know, EPA and DEP conducted sampling of their yard, and then we spread out our work along Rittenhouse Circle. We found that there were approximately 10 properties that had water entering their crawl space or basements that had potential contaminant levels above our cleanup standards. We also found 4 yards that had soil contamination above our cleanup standards. So we initiated in 2019 what's called a time critical removal action. Removal is another part of Superfund. I'm remedial. In many ways, I'm remedial, but I'm in the remedial program, and there's the removal program, which can work faster and deal with these more pressing issues. So that removal action is ongoing right now. I'm going to get into it in a minute. We also completed our 5-year review back in September of last year. The remedy is protective because of the things that we've already done and what removal has done, but there are issues that are obvious that need to be addressed. And we are delineating groundwater contamination yet again to further ensure that we've got the boundaries of the plumes delineated. So the removal action, like I said, we've waterproofed 8 properties. They have been completely waterproofed by a subcontractor. There's sumps and backup pumps and generator power for all of them. All that water is collected and it's going to be sent to the treatment plant for treatment and discharge. We excavated soil from 4 properties, and we have these easements that we need to get in place to kind of ensure long-term access to those areas. I'm going to go to a map right now and start in a second. So we have not only the residential properties that have been addressed, we put in a couple new sumps outdoors where there's a spring. We also have a French drain that we put in, and then there's a second groundwater collection trench that we've put in on a residential property that was kind of ground zero with very high levels of contaminants in their soil, free product that we identified below the subsurface. And so we want to collect that material. And then because of all of this work, currently the treatment plant is at capacity. It can't even treat the amount of water that is collected now. The maximum capacity is about 75 gallons per minute. We're going to be increasing that capacity by expanding the treatment plant, starting under removal and then finishing with remedial. we're going to go from 75 to 175 gallon per minute treatment capacity. And we will currently DEP runs the treatment plant, but as soon as we start this treatment plant expansion, we will take over operation of that part of the site until we're done with that work. So just for reference here, this is that cap. These are the areas where we saw, so this is Rittenhouse Circle here and down here behind this one. This is our deep PCP plume, and this is our shallow PCP plume. Obviously, the concentrations in the center are higher than the outer areas. This is, the contamination is generally moving from west to east. And we have a groundwater collection trench here. And actually, let me show you right here. Where'd it go? Anyway, I'm gonna go back here real quick. So I wanted to show you, so these are our current groundwater recovery locations before the removal. We have a groundwater collection trench here that goes down to the bedrock. There's also a bedrock aquifer groundwater collection trench here. And then we have 3 recovery wells here, here, and here. These are also sitting in the bedrock, in the shallow bedrock collecting areas. We have injection wells, but those are not operating at this time. Sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place here. So this is what the removal action is done along Rittenhouse. This black line is a header line that is conveying the water from all the residential sumps into this larger sump that is situated on a spring that was discharging contaminated water to the surface of a residential property. This is the new groundwater collection trench we've put in. That is going to have water all of this is being conveyed to a new central sump collection area. This is an 18-foot deep sump with dual pumps. It's all fiberglass. That will be installed in the spring. And then that includes the old collection trench dumping into this as well. And then all of it going back to the expanded treatment plant. We also, under removal, have already installed a new force main underneath the YMCA property. That was all done with horizontal drilling, so that we didn't really have to disturb any of Eagle Road or the parking lot, largely. One other thing I wanted to mention is during the removal action, we have drilled more wells, and we did overburden and bedrock. And the point of this map is to show these are the new wells. Everything that's this is the existing known plume. But what I wanted to point out here is that we have some bedrock wells where the deepest, borings had very high concentrations of PCP. This is the treatment plant. So these are on either side near the source area here. And we did find some very high elevated concentrations in the shallow wells, which is the overburden material on top of bedrock, in a few locations as well, here and here. So what that means is we're going to want to probably convert some of those into groundwater recovery wells eventually. But first we want to drill deeper and find the bottom so that we can hit clean water or competent dry bedrock. And we're probably going to also, we will have to expand our monitoring well network laterally so that we can ensure that we have adequate plume delineation and capture. These are the issues that we addressed. They kind of go without saying with everything I'm talking about for the work that we're doing. But from the 5-year review, we need to complete the removal action on residential properties, complete the investigation and installation of new recovery wells, and expand the treatment plant. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what we're doing. So next steps are to we need to install that large groundwater collection sump. That's going to happen in the spring of this year. Continue delineating groundwater. Our removal program is going to be expanding the treatment plant March or April of this year. That's going to start with bringing in a temporary treatment plant that will treat all the water while the new plant or while the existing plant is expanded. We're going to demo the existing building, put up a new temporary building, and expand that plant with a new layout and larger equipment to accommodate the higher flow rates. We will increase, like I said, from 75 to up to a maximum of 175 GPM. That doesn't mean we're going to be pumping at 175 all the time, but we'll have the capacity to do so. And that's based upon modeling to demonstrate what the potential worst case volumes would be. And that'll take about 12 months for that to be completed once removal gets started with that. And then once they're done, my program, I will come in with construction of the permanent plant building installing those new and installing those new recovery wells. And that's going to be about 18 to 24 months to complete that and complete what's called shakedown, which is making sure everything is operating the right way. And then we'll turn things back over to the state to resume operations. Sorry, that was a lot, and I know I'm like 3 minutes over, but are there any questions?
Actually, Josh, I was going to ask people if they can post and chat the questions, and maybe you could just monitor and go back and forth with them in order to make up some time.
Sure.
That be
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I'm afraid we just don't have time to really
Yep.
deal with my questions.
Okay. So
That would be
I'll
great.
stop sharing and then I'll go look at the chat and I'll do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so people, if you could just post that to Josh, or you could post it to everyone so everyone can see and then see the response as well, and they can monitor it where they might have concerns too. But that was great, Josh. Sorry we didn't give you more time.
Oh, that's fine. I'm
Lots of
sorry.
wonderful, updates for us that everybody's interested in, and thanks for all the work that you've been doing to monitor. And I mean, there are just lots of pieces, moving pieces to all these different areas. So we know it's a lot of work.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So yeah, understand if there's questions. I'll take a look here and I'll keep listening.
Okay, and there are comments too about how good the presentation was. So take a look at those.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our third presentation. Cindy Mehallow, she's the Vice Chair of the Newtown Township Environmental Advisory Council. She's also a Penn State Master Watershed Steward, and she just graduated from the class for Delaware County in 2018. And today she's going to give an update on her township's efforts to wrestle with the difficult decision to repair or remove a dam from beyond the pond in the neighborhood park. So, Cindy, I have your presentation here, so I'm going to share screen, and then you can start talking.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, Jaclyn. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Cindy.
Great. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at your annual meeting. I've attended these events for many years and always found them to be very informative. And I think it's a really valuable service that DCVA provides in advancing understanding and protection of our watershed. And I want to give a shout out to both the organization and your members for their active expert advocacy for the environment, and also the many times that they've supported our efforts in Newtown Township. To give a bit more about my background, before joining the Newtown Township EAC about 6 years ago, I served as the chair of my EAC in Glen Rock, New Jersey. And while there, we had a number of initiatives that led to our municipality's certification under the Sustainable Jersey program. Professionally, I'm a sustainability and communications consultant to Fortune 500 companies and other organizations. And I specialize in environmental, social, and governance reporting and non-financial disclosure. Now, while the title of my presentation is Greer Park, it should actually be Greer Park Pond and Dam, because those are the two most important elements of what I'll be speaking about today. Newtown Township is in the middle of creating a master site plan for Greer Park, which has a small man-made pond and several small dams which interrupt the natural flow of Fox's Run. Fox's Run is a first-order stream which originates in Newtown Township and flows into Darby Creek. As many of you may know, the Pennsylvania DEP has been focused recently on dam removal as a means to improve safety and restore healthy waterways. In fact, 14 dams were removed in Pennsylvania in 2019, and that places Pennsylvania as having the second most dam removals that year, exceeded only by California, where 23 dams were removed in 2019. And that's just part of a broader national movement where more states than ever before are getting involved in restoring rivers through dam removal. And according to American Rivers, 90 dams in 26 states removed dams in 2019. That resulted in reconnecting more than 970 upstream miles. Next slide, please. So to give you an overview of what I'll be talking about today, since the final master plan has not been completed and adopted, I'm going to focus on the process to date rather than the final outcome. Hopefully this will be instructive as you learn about what's going on in one corner of our watershed, and maybe you can take away some insights that might help with your efforts in your own watershed. And I want to thank two people who were very helpful in preparing this presentation and have worked diligently on the Greer Park Master Site Plan. I know they're both participating this morning. The first is Wade Pollock, Chair of the Greer Park Master Site Steering Committee and Chair of the Newtown Township's Parks and Recreation Board. And the second is Sheila O'Sullivan Feeney, a member of both the Newtown EAC and the Steering Committee. And Sheila lives immediately adjacent to the park. Next slide, please. Okay, these two maps are taken from the National Wetlands Inventory, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a very helpful resource. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend it. With the single click, I could transition from the satellite view to the other view on the left. Greer Park was formerly known as Winding Way Park. It's a 6-acre neighborhood park and located just northeast of the intersection of Westchester Pike, which runs east-west, and Route 252. On the map, you can see it's the stream there. It's a long, narrow park anchored around the pond and runs along both sides of Fox's Run. As you can see in the map, it's immediately adjacent to homes, but also very close to heavy development. The pale pink area south of Westchester Pike is the Acme Shopping Center, and the large gray area to the left is a corporate park anchored by SAP and ARCO. Now, Fox's Run begins just north of the park in that very small little blue area, heads south, and then turns east and enters this man-made pond with 3 dams, exits to the east. It continues through Brookside Park, runs roughly parallel to Bryn Mawr Avenue, and then joins Darby Creek. At the turn of the century, Greer Park was actually part of a 600-acre farm created by the Pennsylvania Hospital. And sometime around the turn of the century, the waterway was dammed and they created a pond for the hospital farm to more easily provide water and ice for the farm. The Pennsylvania Railroad ran through the center of the farm, paralleling Fox's Run, and it carried passengers and farm produce between Newtown Square's railroad station and Philadelphia. The train line has been removed, but the right-of-way is still present and provides an opportunity for a rails to trail conversion and linkage to Brookside Park and beyond. By the spring of 1940, the hospital board decided to sell the farm. The property was broken up and the surrounding communities of St. Albans were born, and this small 6-acre park was created. I think you got ahead of me. Okay. Now you're on the right slide. Okay. So over recent years, Greer Park and the pond have been impacted by development, disuse, and deterioration. In this colorful map on the right, the park is the narrow dark green area and the red oval shown on the map. The oval is a little hard to see. The orange area to the left is commercial development, including SAP and ARCO, and the new Ellis Preserve mixed use development. The orange area below, the smaller orange area, is the Acme Shopping Center that you might be familiar with. All of the yellow area is residential, and it's worth noting that just in the orange area that I just mentioned, the yellow area above that is the new Lissitor development by Toll Brothers. Now, in looking at the pictures on the left, the photos, the park is a beloved amenity of a few local families who live immediately adjacent to the park, and they primarily enjoy the pond in 3 ways. They like looking at the open water. They have resisted efforts to plant the edge with tall grasses. They have cut them down. So the turf grass goes right up to the edge of the pond. They enjoy fishing there, and when the weather's cold enough, they like ice skating. But the pond has been filling with silt and experiences unhealthy growth, as you can see in these photos, and attracts a very large number of geese, which constantly foul the property and make visiting there extremely unpleasant. When you leave, you go home when you wash your shoes. The park features a largely unused picnic area, and the playground equipment was removed a couple of years ago for non-compliance with safety standards and never replaced. The township knew that it needed to do a larger upgrade and did not want to temporarily put in equipment that might then have to be removed. There's a very small parking lot. There's limited access to the surrounding neighborhoods. And while it's close to shops, restaurants, and a growing number of homes and apartments, there's really no safe pedestrian access to it across 252. And in recent years, the eastern portion of this very long, narrow park has grown gradually wetter and wetter and is now virtually impassable. In fact, we recently identified potential bog turtle and Indiana bat habitat in this area of the park, in the wetter area. Both of these species are on the protected endangered list, and we're going to have to investigate further and get confirmation. And if confirmed, that will impact the design concepts to ensure proper protection for them. Next slide. Okay. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but when William Penn was laying out the Philadelphia area, he called it a green country town. That was his vision for Philadelphia and the surrounding areas. But I think thanks to the recent development, we have pretty much said goodbye to most of the green space in Newtown Township. What was formerly the Charles Ellis School for Girls has now become the Ellis Town Preserve. That's one of the major changes. This was 200 acres, used to provide in the beautiful stone buildings, offices and residential, overnight stays for SAP executives. And it has now been sold off, and all but 12 acres of the open space are gone. It's been replaced by townhomes, parking lots, a fire station, and several multi-story office buildings. Just north of this, in a second major development, Toll Brothers purchased the 200-acre DuPont Foxcatcher estate to create Lissitor, a luxury housing development of 449 homes. This planned community, actually, I think it's a total of 400 acres. They set aside 200 acres of undeveloped fields and woodlands, and Toll Brothers gave another 50 acres to the township to create a nature preserve that is known as the Newtown Meadow Preserve. Next slide. Okay, this slide is just kind of zeroed in on one area, the Ellistown Preserve, that I wanted to show, just so you get a sense of how dense this development was. This is the corner, northwest corner of Westchester Pike and 252. It used to be open space. There was like one car dealership in there, but now you can see it's all buildings and parking lots. If you look at the yellow road that goes up from the center and curves to the right, that is Winding Way that continues off the map across 252, and about a quarter of a mile down the road is Greer Park and the pond. And if you look at the top of the map, you see the word Winding Way. There's a little blue area there. That blue area is the stormwater detention basin that serves most of the eastern part of this area. The western part flows into Crum Creek. But this stormwater detention basin, I'll be referencing again later, is currently being expanded because there's even more development going on. And the overflow from that detention basin flows across 252, mostly underneath, sometimes over, into Greer Park Pond, then continues into Fox's Run and on down further into Darby Creek. And the next slide, please. The consequences of this development, next slide, become very apparent when we have a heavy rainstorm. And the inevitable impacts are felt most acutely by urban areas downstream, such as the community of Darby, which is shown in this photo, and which dates to Hurricane Isaias in August. You can see the rainfall records there. And given the changing weather patterns that are increasing the frequency and severity of rain events, and the more intense tropical storms, the combined impact of the development and the weather patterns are just going to exacerbate these events and the impact. Yeah, the next slide, thank you. All right, slide is these photos were taken the day of, no, go back. These photos were taken the day of Hurricane Isaias, and from left to right show flooding along Westchester Pike 252 with the new Ellis townhomes in the back. The middle photo is that detention basin I mentioned earlier, full of brown silt-filled water, sediment-filled water. And then the right-hand photo is part of the construction site, again, of the new Ellis townhomes. Pretty much all of this water flows down into that detention basin and then over into Greer Park. Next slide. So all of this challenge presents an opportunity. Next slide. Some of you might be familiar with the Chinese proverb, I think, that says in every challenge there's an opportunity. So the catalyst for the township to address Greer Park came in 2014 when the DEP advised the township that Dam 3 in Greer Park was failing and needed to either be removed or repaired. The township recognized that either action, repair or removal, would be financially costly and promote significant public comment and engagement due to the intense local support for the beloved pond. However, converters in the following years has led the township to view this notice of violation less as a burden and more of an opportunity to accomplish several objectives simultaneously. Next slide. I think we missed a slide.
Nope, that was each one. Or is that it?
No, go to the next one. Okay. Okay, go on. Oh, wait, go back. I'm sorry.
We're there. Here.
Okay, sorry. I'm progressing my slides separately from you.
Okay.
Okay, we're done with that slide. Now to the next one. Sorry. Okay, so there are a number of possibilities that could be realized in reinvigorating, reimagining this park. They could improve the habitat, better manage stormwater. These are a number of the possibilities considered by the the Greer Park task force, which was formed. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, we're missing a slide here, but that's my fault. So now I'll talk about the process that the township took as it sought to address the NOV. Next slide, please. So as I said, the NOV was issued in 2014. In 2017, the township commissioned an engineering assessment on the current, to get a better read on what the situation at the park was. Based on that, it decided to seek funding to create a master plan that would not only a revitalization of the park, but also help address the dam issue. And they got $75,000 in funding from DCD and DCNR to develop the Greer Park Master Site Plan. Then they formed a steering committee, which was consisted of members with an interest in the future of Greer Park, and were selected because they held multiple points of view, and the township wanted to ensure constructive conversation and transparency. So the committee consists of members from 9 households in the township, 3 who live north of the park, 3 who live south of the park, a representative from the EAC, a representative from Parks and Rec, a representative from Newtown Square and Bloom, which is a local community beautification group, and a leading community proponent for retaining the pond. And 2 of the members' homes directly border the park. Another 4 are within a couple blocks. 5 of the members have lived at their homes more than 20 years, and 2 of the members actually have ponds on their properties, so have a lot of personal knowledge and experience of ponds. You can see that the group of consultants that was engaged was Urban Research and Development Corp, as well as a member of AES. That actually happens to be Mike McGraw, who many of you might be familiar with. He's a former Newtown Township resident and a very experienced wildlife biologist and ecologist. The steering committee very deliberately wanted to have a lot of horsepower in the habitat and environmental expertise among their consultants, because from scoping of the property, they realized that there are going to be significant environmental issues, especially given the dam situation. There was a lot of public input during summer of 2020, despite COVID. They had stakeholder interviews, focus group sessions. There was a public meeting, masks and all. The EAC was there. I represented the EAC, and got public input on some of the proposals. And then things kind of came to a head late in December 2020 with a presentation to the Board of Supervisors. Next slide, please. Okay. While the steering, I'm going to back up, sorry, the slide got out of order. Some of the catalyst that really resulted in the township was kind of a perfect storm of events, in that after the township received the notice of violation, they were engaged in a concerted planning effort, in part due to an energetic, forward-looking township manager. In 2016, they completed a comprehensive plan. Significantly, during the public input process, township residents shared their concerns about too much traffic, too much development, and a very strong desire for a walkable community and more open space. Then the township completed a master site plan for the Newtown Meadow Preserve. This was kind of a proof of concept, because it was kind of the first time the township got significant grant funding for this type of event. They kind of thought they couldn't do it, but then the EAC led the effort and showed that the township could be successful in getting this funding. And that led to the creation of that plan. We had nothing to do with this Pennsylvania State Recreation Plan, but that was a reference point for the task force. And in May of this year, the community finished a strategic plan, which is a more forward-looking document. And they also, in the summer, released a Greenways and Open Space Network plan. And that, through all of the public input for those sessions, it just reinforced the message from the residents that they want an improved quality of life. They want residents surveyed supported environmental initiatives, and they wanted to protect open space and protect wildlife. And of course, as every municipality has, we're also developing and trying to get sign off on our MS4 pollution reduction plan, which also intersects with the issues going on there. Thank you. In the next slide, you can see some of the results from the public opinion survey. In this slide, you can see that there was very strong support for protecting the environment, for protecting wildlife. And just a hats off to the steering committee and the consultants. I included this data just to show you the robustness of their effort and how they really made a real effort to gather public input and analyze it and weigh it throughout the process. Next slide.
Cindy, just to give a quick update, you have just under 10 minutes left.
Okay, we can skip these two slides. Let's go on. We'll skip that slide. Well, no, we should keep that slide. So this is kind of encapsulates the committee had to make, which is remove or retain the pond. And they got very strong pushback from residents who thought, well, see, I just said it, they were not going to remove the pond, they were going to remove the dam. And many residents thought that removing the dam equated to removing the pond, but the committee stood firm in recognizing the true impact of either removing or retaining the pond, and decided that the greatest interests of the public were for walking paths and a sustainable environment, and that removing the dam would promote a more sustainable environment and would not impact the desire for walking paths. Next slide, please. Just to point out, the EAC was very supportive of this entire process. And in addition to informal input and dialogue, we provided formal comment at several points, which I've noted here. Most of the comment came through comment letters or advisory documents that we provided to other parts of the municipality, the municipal government. And we received a lot of affirmation from the Board of Supervisors saying they really valued and appreciated this, because it not only gave them a second form of guidance on making their decision, but when they had to make politically unpopular decisions, it kind of gave them cover. So they really affirmed our support, and I know the steering committee also appreciated that. Next slide, please. So when we look at the challenges, next slide. As I said, this was a very difficult decision. One of the main factors was the cost. They also looked at which option would grant more funding, what would be the impact on the watershed, how wide would the benefits be, what was most environmentally sustainable, what aligned with other township priorities, and what would allow for the continuation of recreational options. So next slide. This is a cost analysis that the consultant provided, where they did a side-by-side comparison of the initial cost of either repairing the dam or removing it. And you can see it would be more costly to repair it. And also the annual maintenance costs were projected to be more costly. So this was just one of the considerations that the steering committee evaluated in their final decision. So option 2, which would be removing the dam, was part and parcel of converting part of the pond to an emergent wetland. Now, next slide. To understand what an emergent wetland is, this slide kind of gives you an idea that, illustrates that. And this was a concept that was very hard for the public to grasp. They are not familiar with the terms emergent wetland. They equated it with swamp, marsh, weeds, mud, mess. So this really required and still requires an ongoing public information campaign to help residents realize that while they will not have while the pond will change and they will not have an unobstructed view, that it will be environmentally healthier and it can still be attractive. Next slide, please. So the next slide shows photos of what a possible emergent wetland would look like. Granted, it is not a manicured pond, but it is something more healthy and still beautiful in its own right. Next slide. Here you see a map of the park, and the pond is kind of off to the left, and the two red ovals indicate areas where the stream bank and the riparian buffer can be restored, which was another factor the committee considered in its decision, because that aligns with some of the MS4 proposals. And you can see the entire, almost the entire right half of the map is too wet to really walk anymore. And in one of the earlier pictures, you saw a boardwalk, which is under consideration to increase accessibility and still protect the environment. Next slide. So throughout this entire event, the steering committee has worked very hard to get information out, widely publicizing the availability of the online survey, information on the website, articles, emails, and really they knew that public opinion would be difficult to manage. They involved one of the most vocal advocates on the committee. That was a mixed blessing because despite the fact that she was involved and had access to information, she was the chief proponent of disseminating, inaccurate information. And the neighbors launched a vigorous outcry, next slide, using social media. They complained that the township was destroying the park, and they did not understand that the recreation would still retain a water feature, albeit different than what they were used to. So where we stand now is that the committee/task force presented is about halfway through and presented their recommendation to remove the dam to the Board of Supervisors because that would be a pivotal decision in the committee wrapping up its report. This was a catalyst for a lot of angst and opposition, and the supervisors experienced a lot of pressure from the residents. The EAC tried to support their decision, for which the board was very appreciative, and also Newtown Square and Bloom supported it. So we're still ongoing with this. Just to wrap up with lessons learned, when I asked two of the members who I've been in contact with most for their advice, these are some of the words of wisdom that they shared. Involve experts. They felt a great deal of confidence because of the superb experts they had supporting them. They recruited allies in other organizations in the township. They expected opposition, and they got it. And finally, they just have to constantly inform and engage the public. So that's it. Sorry to rush through so quickly, but if you have any questions, I guess you could share them in the chat and I'll deal with them later because I know you have another speaker coming.
And
Thanks,
sorry,
Cindy. Yep.
computer is just a little bit slow trying to stop share screen and everything. Was somebody like we could probably do one question. Otherwise, I do see a couple.
Kate had a question. If Kate wants to unmute and ask it.
Well, actually, was there somebody else that was getting ready to speak? Because I see Kate's message in the chat.
Okay. And then Lisa's question is in the chat. Does anybody else have a question?
Okay, hearing none. Yeah, if Cindy, if you could go through the chat and answer those questions, that would be great. And
Sure.
thanks for your presentation. Apologies for running late with the agenda, but I did see posts that said that they really appreciated the information and that you know your town so well, which is great. And the round of virtual applause. All right. So Ken, are you here?
Yes.
Here. I just couldn't find you on my screen. There you are. Are you planning to share your screen to do
No, I sent pictures to someone. I didn't realize that we could. I would have put together a PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, I can pull up the photos if while we start. And my apologies because as I go back and forth, it's a little harder for me to pull up everything, but I will get it.
So
Right.
while you're getting that.
Ken, this is
pulled up-
Alan. Yep, Ken, this is Alan. I took your pictures. I put them into a PowerPoint type presentation. So hopefully I got the order right. So that's what
Okay.
Jaclyn will be working off of.
Okay. While Jaclyn is getting that ready, just a quick reminder of where we've come from. This started out as largely a Save Marple Green Space fight in 2015, and now we have a coalition of members consisting of Darby Creek Valley Association, Crum Creek Neighbors, which is a Marple Township group. Of course, Save Marple, Delaware Riverkeeper Network has been absolutely key with their expert testimony, and the Clean Air Council. So is that up yet? No. So I'm toggling between notes here.
It's actually, Ken, if you could, sorry, I didn't have that here, just give a little background of yourself.
Sure. So I'm a longtime high school teacher. I left a few years ago. I now do primarily volunteer work in the land preservation advocacy world. I'm involved with a group in Westtown Township involving the Craybilly Farm. I was part of the group that successfully saved Beaver Valley and Concord Township on the Delaware border. When everyone was saying it was a done deal, you can't fight City Hall, that these developers have too much money, we still won. We won in court, and we forced the developer to have to sell his land to us because he was looking at a 10-year legal battle with no guarantee of winning. And I've been involved in the Marple Township Donguanella matter since about August of 2015. I grew up across the street from that forest on right off Eagle Road. I walked to O'Hara when I went there, and spent a lot of time in those woods. And even back in the 80s, it was amazing. But over the last 40 years, it's become an even more impressive forest, and the trails have become more impressive as well. And that's what I was hoping to lead off with my first slide there.
It's opening now. So all I got to do is hit share screen. The PowerPoint is opening. It's just such a large file, I guess, from it being put in PowerPoint as opposed to, that's the first I pulled up. Alan, sorry if you did send the PDF version of it.
Yeah, I think the PDF is faster.
So if anyone has not been in those woods and has not seen the trails, I strongly recommend that you get over there, park at the Home Depot or at the office building next door to Home Depot. I've never had a problem. I've never heard of any problems of people parking there. Walk diagonally across the street towards the light at Reed Road and Red Hill Road, and you'll see a trail entrance on the right. And when you go in there, like the first 50 feet or 100 feet are kind of overgrown with invasives, as you'd expect on the edge. But as you get into the forest, it's just absolutely amazing that a place like that still exists in the middle of Delaware County. The two streams cross the property, one of which, Darby Creek Valley Association, was instrumental in petitioning DEP to upgrade to a high quality stream. right now it's just a warm water fishery. It is adjacent to an impaired stream that essentially takes all the road runoff from Sproul and Reed and washes it down into Whetstone Run, which is a direct tributary to Darby Creek. So we have not heard anything on that petition. There was a preliminary answer from DEP saying that they were going to deny it, but that was not a final answer. Of course, the developer and the Archdiocese moved heaven and earth to try to block the petition. And as of now, they're not successful. And we're looking for possible legislative help from our area delegation to intercede with DEP and the Environmental Quality Board to essentially give us an upgrade. And if that happens, then it makes it harder to develop that part of Don Guanella, because you can't change the quality of the water once you get a high quality designation. So how's that going, Jackie? Still?
Here it is.
Okay.
See?
Okay. Can you go to the map first?
Yep. Sorry, it's still thinking a little bit. Yep.
Go to the fourth slide down. So I made a map in 2017 showing the trails that are in there. It was a royal pain to do this because you have to get in there with a GPS device and record your hike, and then go home and try to match it up with what's actually there in Google Maps. So I logged about 10 miles of trails in there. Of course, those trail designations, the different colors, are some of them loop back on each other. So that's part of the 10 miles. But as far as like trails that are unrepeating trail, is probably like 7 miles of unrepeating trail in those woods. So I strongly recommend you get in there. Multiple stream crossings, some very old growth areas between the two tributaries, both of which are unnamed, both of which flow into the Whetstone Run. So the developer would essentially destroy everything you see there, except for some narrow bands along the two tribs. So let's go to the picture of the woods, if we could. Throughout the long process that we've just gone through over the past 2 years from this developer, who originally, when he came to town, said that he wanted to preserve these woods and build a modest shopping center along Sproul. That modest shopping center morphed into something on the scale of 9 acres bigger than the entire Springfield Mall. So that was just way too big for anybody to stomach. We said we will not tolerate that. So we essentially went to the mattresses, as they did in The Godfather. So I mean, the developer has argued over the past 2 years that the woods are dead and dying and afflicted by too many invasives, and it's essentially, we'll be improving it, he says, by cutting it down. Right? He should have written Orwell's novels instead of Orwell. So you can see the forest is in wonderful shape. There are some areas on the edge that are filled with invasives, but something that a forest maintenance plan could essentially deal with. But the interior is in great shape with some invasives, but also a pretty healthy understory in many areas. Next slide, Jaclyn. So some of the trails are just spectacular in the fall. You get out there, you can see down into these stream valleys. It's just an amazing view. And this is one of the old growth sections that would be all cut down with the developer's plan. Next slide. In 2016, we held a cleanup hike. We met at the Home Depot and walked across the street. Next slide, please. And then collected several bags of trash. The teenagers are not very good over there. They go in there and drink and leave a big mess behind. So we had a probably 40-person hike, and we pulled a lot of trash out of there and exposed some people to the forest for the first time. They had never been in there. They didn't even know that there were trails in there. Next slide, please. Let's go back to the thumbnail view. I gave the order that these were. Okay, let's go back one.
All right, it takes a minute for when I click it to where.
Go to the one that has the different colors, green, yellow, blue.
Yep, I'm clicking it, just gonna take a second.
Okay, so Don Gwinnell is essentially divided into 3 zoning parcels. As you can see, 58, 81, and 74 acres. The institutional district hugs Sproul Road next to Cardinal O'Hara. There's a middle RC zoning district, which allows for higher housing density of 2 houses per acre. And then the RB district allows for 1 house per acre. But as with most township codes, there are like density allowances. If you like theoretically save some open space, a few shreds, you're allowed a higher density. And the developer is invoking that in this plan. So instead of like what you might expect to be 200 or 180 houses or so, given the environmental constraints on the site, he's coming in with about 213 houses, which happens to be the acreage of the whole site. So let me see, where am I? Okay, so we just went through in the fall, we made our presentation, the Whetstone Coalition, and we have to thank our experts like Darren LeBrake and Tim Devaney and Rick Ray and Jim Schmidt, along with Michelle Adams and a guy named Jay Cooperson, who attacked the developer's plan from all different angles. We had opposition presentations concerning the 6-acre former landfill. Darren spoke to the leachate, essentially contaminating one of the receiving streams, one of the tributaries there. He also dealt with the poorly designed and poorly planned remediation of that dump, which I'm hoping something Melissa's office can take a look at. We attacked the stormwater management and how completely inadequate that was, how poor the design of the development was, how it made almost no attempt to fit in with the environmentally constrained nature of the site. It is a very hilly and wet and steep area. So some of the sites had, slopes on their property that were just wildly absurd, which were pointed out by our land planning expert. So we pointed out how the development was encroaching on wetlands and floodplains, and how building this development would cause Marple to not meet its Pennsylvania pollution reduction plan requirements, and how it would exacerbate downstream flooding. So we made a very strong case, and the commissioners came back in December and rejected the development application, as it's known. And in their written decision, which if we could go to that written decision briefly, that screenshot, in their written decision, they invoked the Environmental Rights Amendment, as we did in our argument, and we were like absolutely kind of surprised that they did, but they did. And their rejection letter formalizes all of their different objections and cites the Environmental Rights Amendment repeatedly throughout. And I'd like to just possibly quote a little bit from their decision. What happened to that? Well, actually, I don't know what I do with that. So essentially, they found that, picking the Environmental Rights Amendment apart, they said that destroying this forest would hurt people downstream. It would hurt the people of Marple. It would create more flooding. It would contribute to bigger wind problems and air quality problems because of the way that the forest acts as a windscreen and a pollution absorber. They said that the public has a right to the aesthetic values of the environment, which this forest provides. So it was a shocking document. And there is a precedent in Delaware County for common pleas court where we are right now, because the developer has appealed Marple's decision. In 2017, Judge Green on the common pleas court ordered Concord Township to, and this was relating to the Beaver Valley issue, ordered Concord Township to go back and subject the development application to a test and to determine whether or not the developer's application met the standards laid out by the Environmental Rights Amendment. So that was a bombshell, and it set a nice little precedent in Delaware County. And so in a subsequent development adjacent to the Beaver Valley, the original Beaver Valley plan, Concord Township invoked the Environmental Rights Amendment. to defend itself and to stop the development, and that's in court right now. And Marple just followed suit. So we have that precedent from Judge Green, and we hope that that helps us win this case. We are prepared to go the distance with this. We are prepared to take this to Commonwealth Court and to the Supreme Court if they'll have it. Most cases don't actually get heard by the Supremes, but we hope to just keep tying this up in court and have the developer maybe come to his senses that the public wants this saved. So real quick, if we could go to the slide. So scroll down, please. Go to the slide where it shows the developer's plan. Scroll up a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Right there, that one, yep.
Yep.
So the three zoning districts have been broken up kind of haphazardly by the developer. In a way, it's clear the developer wants to try to bankrupt the opposition. His goal is to submit 3 separate applications, force us to have to defend against all of them, force us to have to maintain 3 different legal battles, and for the purpose of having our coffers run dry. The land along the front is the subject of an institutional application right now. They just submitted a conditional use application for that last week. The area adjacent to the Blue Route, which you can see in the lower right-hand corner there, is kind of an empty parcel looking thing. It's 52 acres. The developer wants to put 72 houses there. So that's a new application that we have to fight. The area which shows houses planned, that's the proposal that we just defeated and that we're now in court defending the township. We're going to intervene in that case. So and that helps. That does 2 things. One, it shows the judge that, that a lot of people care about this land. It helps back up Marple's decision, but it also makes it impossible for the township to settle. Like they can't come back and say, well, if you just build 100 houses, we'll let you build. Being an intervener, we can block that. So there can be no funny business down the road. So that's the status of the legal fight right now. We can always use money, given that the developer has deep pockets. His partner, who's the finance guy in this, a guy named Brian McElwee, was indicted by the Pennsylvania Attorney General, I guess 10 or 12 years ago, for allegedly trying to bribe the state treasurer to throw investment business to his Valley Forge Investments firm. That indictment was eventually dropped, but these people have very deep pockets and they're not going to walk away without a fight. So we have to be well armed. And so one of the things that Darby Creek Valley Association is doing, and if you could go to that screen, we need money. And so I changed my Amazon account to, I basically designated DCVA as my smile.amazon recipient. So every time I make a purchase on Amazon, which is frequently, a little piece of that goes to DCVA. And if 5,000 people in Delaware County did that, DCVA would be flush with cash. We'd have all the money we needed to go the distance in this legal fight. So we're working on a grant for Crum Creek neighbors, and we have a nice donor for Save Marple Green Space, but we have to be able to commit to a 10-year fight. And Peter Miller, the developer, is not, he's not a stranger to long legal battles. In East Brandywine Township, Chester County, he's been involved in a 12-year legal battle over a 4-acre parcel. So we need the muscle to go the distance with this guy. So let me just see what else. So the developer, his appeal has already been filed. Our petition to intervene is in the works. And so I think I've hit everything. Does anyone have any questions? Or are we taking questions?
Comments in the chat where people did have a couple of questions. Besides, they're saying that everything was great and thanks for the update.
Okay.
There was a question about whether or not the contract between Miller and the Archdiocese is supposed to expire. Do they have an agreement of sale? Do they actually own the property? Things like that. I don't know if you can elaborate.
I can answer that. So Miller actually met with county council, a subset of county council, and essentially admitted that he bought a piece of the land, the 89 acres that we just finished up with the township fighting over, and which is now in court. Those 89 acres he purchased in August. So he bought it for 10 million, but in the meeting with county council, he claimed he paid 19 million, but we have the tax documents showing otherwise. So he paid 10 million. We don't know whether he's closed on the other parcels, which would be about 120 acres of land. Because sometimes when you close on a deal, it takes a while for it to be registered in the deeds office in the county. So there's that.
So if you could look in the chat, Ken, there was a comment about like where to send checks. And obviously, you know,
Okay.
Save Market Space can obviously get that as well. So if you could post that in there, as well as I think Robin asked about the stream upgrade, and I can answer that. I mean, nothing has happened there. It was not officially given the yay or nay by the, oh, I'm blanking on the exact title, but it's the Environmental Advisory Board or Quality Board. That's
No, quality board. I'm just asking, you know, like, it's been an awfully long time, and I'm just not sure if we're pressing as hard as we should be on everybody up to the governor. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Oh, well, there's a bigger initiative than that regarding all stream upgrades. So there is like a running list of several petitions that have just been sitting for years besides ours, ones that even predate the ones that we put in for the unnamed trib for Whetstone Run. And that's been a campaign ran by, I believe it was it Penn Environment or Penn Future, one of them. I talked to them in more detail about this. They've been doing press releases around it, getting people to make comments. It is a big problem. And you're right, you know, the question of whether or not it's gone up to the governor's level is a good question. And we should probably address that with our partners overall, because this continues to be a problem.
I can't emphasize enough, though, everyone watching this video, to designate DCVA as your recipient on Amazon and talk to everybody you know about doing the same, because it's going to take money to defeat these developers.
Yeah, and it's an easy way, you know, because Amazon's donating. So
yeah,
why not?
I'm up to nearly $6, and I've only been on there for 3 months. So 5,000 people did it, we'd be golden.
I'd just like to add, if anyone is looking for the link on how to do the Amazon Smile, DCVA has it on our homepage. And one of the things that you can do is sometimes your regular Amazon account will take you out of the Smile account. If you put everything in your regular basket that you regularly shop in, and then go to DCVA's website and hit on the link for the Smile account, it'll automatically put everything that was in your basket into your Smile account basket. So DCVA will be able to get a portion of the funds that you spent.
And there are a couple other questions. Looks like there's a lot coming in. If you want to take a look, somebody suggested given the presentation at another summit. Others wanted to know whether or not the Archdiocese got that money right up front. I don't know if you know that, yes or no.
They got the $10 million from the August sale. The rest is apparently not going to close, at least the front's not going to closing until 2024. But we don't know about the 52-acre forested piece along O'Hara's ball fields. So, you know, of course, the Archdiocese and the developer have an incentive not to reveal any information. So, and they thought they were going to get by with this lie that they paid $19 million for it, but they didn't. Because the tax man files a document with the deed showing what they paid for transfer tax, we know that it was 10 million. So he tried to pull a fast one with Elaine.
This is Peter. I think that question might have pertained to sort of the original retainer that gets paid to hold the property until.
That's right, Peter. Yes, that was my question.
Yeah, and so I do think there was a retainer amount. I think the the first developer who made a go at this paid a $5 million retainer. And yes, that retainer does just go into the pocket of the Archdiocese.
Well, in this case, they didn't pay a retainer. They paid a monthly maintenance fee to maintain the contract with the Archdiocese. We don't know what that is. The developer's not redacted all that information in documents he sent to the township.
Right. Well, I have to say, Ken, when I heard the news that they voted no, it's just like, it was a huge win. And I know, obviously, there's still more to happen. And we know for those that get involved in these battles, it's a long time. But guess what? If we're resilient and, you know, everybody stays invested, like you said, we can win in the end. And oftentimes it's just that weight. It's that weight sometimes that drives them away. Even if we don't get an absolute decision from the courts or whatever, sometimes just waiting and dragging it out makes them move on, because market forces change. I mean, so many things can change that they say, okay, it's no longer viable. And sometimes that's how you get that win. So just so people understand that it is a long ways to go, but every time these wins happen, it moves us closer to the end game. And thank you, Ken. I mean, what would we have done without you picking up on volunteering and taking the lead on this? You need one person dedicated day in, day out, monitoring all aspects of this, because otherwise, you know, everybody's so busy. So
the developer is scared to death of people like us because we're crazy and we have no money.
I know, it makes the situation even worse. I'm like, wait, how? Like, I don't understand this. So thank you. And we're so happy you were able to give this update. So many people had questions.
I'll look through the chat, answer what I can.
Yes, and definitely about giving money and things like that. You want to monitor that one.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
People gave applause. So I don't have much to say in closing. I'd rather turn that time over to our little blast updates of things that we have coming along in the next year. So first, Sue, you want to just give an update on when about the stream cleanup and people signing up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jaclyn. I just want to let people know our cleanup is April 10th of this year. It's on a Saturday between the hours of 9 and 12, except for a couple locations are starting a little bit later. Some sleepyheads out there. But we're still creating new sites right now. Where I have had captains confirm sites, they're already listed on our DCVA Annual Cleanup website, and people can start to sign up for the cleanups. If you have a site that you would like to add, just send me an email and I can put that on for you. There's lots of different sites and it's still going. So we hope to see everyone out there. So I think we have, I want to say 15 sites right now. It might be a little bit more.
Okay, well, I know a number of people here definitely, you know, participate and help out. And there's obviously time, not talking until April, and usually we get tons of turnout, and obviously following procedures to make sure wearing masks and keeping our distance from people that aren't within your immediate family and things like that. We always want to make sure that we're make sure these events are safe for everyone. So Sue, as you check on that, maybe Alan, you want to give an update on the date for the stream watch? Alan, you're on mute.
So typically the stream watch precedes the stream cleanup by 1 week, because we try to get in there before the stream gets all trod over and ripped up, and with people doing their great job in the stream, because it takes about 6 or 8 weeks for the insects to recolonize those streams. So we're going to get in there. We did not do it last year. That was the first time that we've ever not done a stream watch in the spring. But now that we know so much more about COVID and have a better handle on the do's and don'ts, I think we can have a successful stream watch this year on April 3rd. It'll be the same sites as we've done, 5, possibly a 6th site. And we'll probably start somewhere between 8 and 9 a.m. in our Yaden site. So keep an eye out. As always, we've had some nice turnouts last year, so hopefully people will feel reinvigorated to get started this year in April. And remember, it is a rain or shine event unless it's a really bad rain event, which we have had in April. But we will try to get out there, rain or shine. And remember to bring your waiters and your appetite, because we will pay for lunch and a good attitude. Good attitude is always a good thing.
Thanks, Alan. Jamie, are you still on? If you want to give an update on our Stream Smart house calls program.
I'm here.
Yay.
So Stream Smart house calls is open to anyone. It's sort of like an audit of your property for best management for stormwater practices. There's a website. If you Google Stream Smart Stormwater house calls, it brings up the website, and then you can fill out the form and a request will be sent to us and we can schedule a visit out to your home.
Yep, and we have the link on our webpage, but Stream Smart House Calls has its own website, and people can sign up and learn more about that. And thanks to our funders, right? National Fish and Wildlife Foundation,
yep.
William Penn Foundation, and anybody else I'm missing?
I think that's it right now. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks.
Darren, I don't know if we want to say anything else about tags, since we talked a lot about the landfill, just that, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple of little things. We reviewed and commented on that aquatic habitat baseline risk assessment. If anybody wants those comments, they're either posted on the website or we'll put them up on the website. And then there's a couple of red flag areas that we're looking at or monitoring down there in the lower part of the watershed. One is the Norwood landfill. And if anybody was keeping track of the chat, it looks like that will not end up getting added to the lower Darby Creek Superfund site area. It'll end up being its own separate site if they find, and I will be impressed if they don't find problems there. And then, back in the early fall, I think it was, I had a bunch of email and conversations back and forth with a resident in Norwood, or not in Norwood, but in Fulcroft, who's about halfway between the Norwood landfill and the Fulcroft landfill and annex sites. And she said that back behind her house, there's some old dumping back there, and it may just be tires, but I did a little bit of property search on Delaware County's tax map website, and I found that that piece of property immediately behind her home was originally owned by the same people who owned the property where the Fulcroft landfill is. So now that all the leaves are down and most of them have decomposed on the florist floor, it's very easy to see any sort of waste or anything suspicious back there. So sometime in the next couple of weeks before we, well, A, when it's warm, and B, before the leaves start to come back out, I'm gonna go down there and just stomp around using my many decades of hazardous waste site work experience to have a look and see if there's anything there. And if I find anything, I'll tap Josh and let him know.
Great, thanks.
So that's what's happening. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. Actually, Darren, why don't you give an update on the program running under Growing Greener right now? I have that on.
Oh, sure, yeah. We have the balance of this year, and I think we got an extension into like maybe the first half of 2022. And what our goal is we got a grant from Pennsylvania DEP to cluster 50 rain gardens in a small headwaters neighborhood, and then monitor the reduction in hot water coming off of the roofs and driveways, because we'd be directing that water into rain gardens, and the volume reduction and the timing. So what'll happen is if during a larger storm event, the first part of it will stay in the rain garden. And then when it's way too much water, it'll go in anyway. But we're going to be able to measure the reduction in time between when the raindrops hit the impervious surface and they make it to the pipe, and the volume of water and the temperature of the water. And now that we're coming into the warmer weather, we're going to be working with the township to install some instruments in those pipes, but we've identified 3 specific areas in roughly for geography, the intersection of Mill Road and Earlington. So south of Mill Road, Earlington. So that general area up there, we've identified 3 places. I have to do all 50 of them in one of those places so that I can measure the difference with another one. And then what happens is if we show a positive result, I can take that to other bigger granting organizations and we can do 100 rain gardens and start to do more and more and more of the watershed. But until I can find 50 people to get free, professionally designed and maintained rain gardens, teaching the homeowners, there is very minimal maintenance on them. We'll be using native plants, so you don't have to fuss about them. You just cut them back if they get too big. And we're looking for people to volunteer to allow us to use a piece of their yard for a beautiful rain garden. So that's what's happening.
Spread the word. Spread the word.
Karen, where's that again? Mill Road in Arlington?
Yes, sort of. If the small watershed that we're looking at, the drainage divide on it is the top of it is Mill Road, and then the west side of it is Darby Road, and the east side of it is Earlington. So we have to go to the very top, and we've identified 3 places up where essentially where Mill and Earlington intersect. So it's a cross intersection. So you'd be looking at the southwestern corner or quadrant of that intersection. So that's the general area. Sue and I both have the addresses of both of the 3 areas. We've sent them some outreach brochures back at the very beginning of COVID. So like in April, we got a few responses, but I really feel as though it's a personal conversation. Here's what we want to do. Here's what it'll look like. We're not just going to slap in whatever we think needs to go there. We're going to work with the individual property owner to create what they would like to have out there in terms of the color and the type of vegetation. And then all we need to do is just create a depression to capture the water before it leaves their yard, or some of the water. We're not going to obviously capture all of it.
Right.
Hi, I'm actually now the Lincoln Highway Council for Philadelphia, which is a national organization of Lincoln Highway Association. I hope to have a big event in Philadelphia and the western suburbs in 2026. You could very well do little stormwater projects along Lancaster Avenue, which from was it Overbrook Farms to almost to Paoli is the headwater of the whole watershed. So in a couple of years or whatever, so long as it's done by 2026 for what I'm doing, it would be really good. You can get some national recognition. We can make sure that we'd have a national convention here, make a big thing about it, but it could help a little bit for the watershed.
Thanks for sharing, Scott. All right, the last but not least, Sue, you want to talk about citizen monitoring? Give an update?
Slow and steady. We are doing the Salt Watch, which anyone can join. We're doing it through the Isaac Walton League. You can find the link on our website, and that is for anyone can join and do that. Our full scale and our upstream sampling for citizen science is on a temporary slow pace due to COVID and some resource restrictions, but we're still moving ahead. We are going to start sampling up in the Berwyn area, hopefully within the next month or two.
Great. Thank you. So that concludes our annual meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for sitting here, for a couple hours, listening to updates, all fantastic speakers, great information, many ways to get involved, of help provide support, and also hear about the things that DCVA is following and doing. So I hope to see all of you at the cleanup or other activities that we're going to be having outdoors in the upcoming spring season. I really appreciate all of your support to DCVA. It's just great, especially for these virtual events, to have almost 50 people. I think that's truly a success, especially, like I said, just sitting in front of the screen. And also we couldn't entice you with like free food. Tony normally organizes and cooks. I do truly miss that part of it. But, we will get back to that soon. So with that being said, I did post in the chat that we are taking a lunch break. We do have business to take care of, which should only be about a half hour to approve and review and approve our minutes from the last annual meeting, our treasurer's report, as well as voting on board members and giving out our Ribbon of Green Award. So if you're able to stick around, jump back on at around 1:30, please feel free to do so. This will be open. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your weekend and look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Bye. We'll see you in a little bit. 1:30. Remember, 1:30. Don't disappear.
Hey, Jackie, we're going to stay in this meeting for the 1:30?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Great presentations.
Yeah, we get turkey dinner out of this?
Yeah. It's called virtual turkey dinner. I'll put up a picture of a turkey.
Is that a turkey that just asked that question?
Yeah.
All right, whoever's got the record button better hit stop record right now.
Right.
It's not me. I can't.
Yeah, I see it up there.